Today is August the 7th. No, August the 8th. That was yesterday. And this is the Architects and Engineering Board meeting. We are starting today at 8:30 with the Architect Committee. And so I will go ahead and turn it over to our chair, Mr. Rick Thompson.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you.
Call the Architects Committee meeting to order. I think we have a couple of quick agenda items here. I know we have an IPAL item and possibly a review of one of our applicants. Do we need any kind of a roll call, or are we good?
Normally for the committee meetings we don't. As long as we've got quorum, I think we're okay to proceed. Okay. And we do. All the architects are here, okay. So we can continue.
Good. Thank you. Yes, we are present and accounted for. So the conversations and anything else that obviously comes up, the IPAL and then a couple of the applicants. So would anybody like to start on any particular subject? You want to start on the IPAL and then?
Let's start on IPAL first.
Okay, I think we may have all, well, I know we all have received some information from Wanda regarding an applicant who is trying to be licensed in the state based on their completion of the IPAL program. And part of the issue with the approval process of that is that the experience time frame by the state, by our state law, is not in sync with this IPAL program that's an NCARB program. So I guess we want to talk about what we need to do to approach that and how we might be able to accommodate something in the future, or where are we going with IPAL? So,
well, and I think just to condense what IPAL is and what we're being asked. The IPAL is a program with the university where supposedly by the time you pass or graduate, you have passed all of the ARE, which I think this person has, and completed all the AXP requirements, which is the experience requirements. And so I guess our question is, has this person passed the experience requirements? And if so, does Tennessee law allow this experience requirement to be accepted in Tennessee? Done through the AXP, and we normally are okay with that through NCARB. I would think that's not a problem. But I don't want to jump in there and talk about something I don't know.
Before maybe make sure legal answers, but I thought that was our issue, that it was a conflict with our laws. However, I do think, and I don't know how we should do it, but I do think it's something that we should try to encourage to change for a couple of reasons. It's well, for one of the main ones is we always talk about trying to help people to get registered, and this is many other places in the country are doing it. So maybe first the question is it conflict? I've always heard that it was, and I think that was even brought to my attention at the NCARB conference, that we were one of the few states that didn't allow it or had some issues with it.
I had the same conversation with some of the NCARB executives at our last meeting in D.C. They were actually, one of them approached me and said, "Why are you opposing IPAL?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" So, and the whole issue was that we, per our state law, my interpretation of the law is that we can't, until they have the 3-year experience level, we can't approve them. And typically what's happened in the past is when you were doing, IDP or AXP, it took you a lot longer than 3 years to get all that done. So there really wasn't any issue. Very, very few, if we had any, that people didn't have their experience level. So it really, this is kind of throwing a little wrench into the mix. But I assured the NCARB folks that we were not opposed to this by any means. We're trying to encourage licensure in the state of Tennessee and nationwide. However, we've just got this issue that we have to deal with from a state level. And as we all know, any time that we support something that NCARB that's good for the profession, we always make it perfectly clear that that doesn't necessarily mean we can do that in the state of Tennessee, as in other states. It's always an issue, and it always will be, I'm sure, or maybe not. But so I don't know. I don't think there's a whole lot we can do other than to go back and see how that experience level might be interpreted. Did they really have 3 years, or did they not? Or would we be prepared moving forward for the Law and Rules Committee to possibly explore changing that 3-year period and accepting something more in tune with the national program of what the experience level nationwide is? So that's kind of my thought process.
Well, one question I have, is this person trying to be first licensed in Tennessee? In other words, obviously they've been through this program and have met the requirements for the program in the state where this university was. I don't even know what state it is, but if so, my question to them would be, why don't you become licensed in that state and then transfer your license to Tennessee if that's what you want? And my question to us is, if that's the case and they are registered, would we have a problem approving? No difference in the experience of what we're looking at now as opposed to then.
Good question. I didn't think about it like that. Do we have any staff input on that? Help us,
I
please.
think, absolutely. I think we're addressing the same issue, but from two different angles probably. One may be a rule to help us clean this up and allow some of this flexibility that we want to have, because I think you are correct. And if Stuart will have a chance to research it once we have guidance that the committee and our professionals are interested in us having this flexibility. So if the rule doesn't allow for it, then his research will be what exactly would we have to touch and open up. And we started. We started to where by October you have something in writing that says here's the one area, and I think it's only one, where this experience is mentioned and therefore would need to be in line with NCARB's changes or however we word it. Because we may have others like IPAL that come through in the near future with all the changes that we don't want to limit ourselves if we open the rules. So we will definitely start that research because from what I'm hearing, it's something we want to be able to accept. A lot of other states are doing it, and you're right, if they don't have anything specific in their statute prohibiting them, they may be able to just run with it. So we'll have to look at where it is in ours that stops us and start that, because it sounds like you all want to do that.
And Roxana, it is in the law, not. It's in the law rather than the rule.
So the law, of course, changes it if it's not specific to us being able to touch it. That would be a conversation we'll have with the organization. And if it's something that you all support and they do as well, then they definitely in the next January or before then have those conversations to have that removed. And I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be touched, hopefully, because it would bring people into the industry faster.
I'd say we definitely want to do that, and I know NCARB would help, with any kind of information or more detail and what other states have done to help assist that. And I know the guy's face, but we can put that person in touch with whomever as well.
Harry?
Yeah.
Harry Faulkner.
Yeah.
He's the one that cornered me at breakfast. So.
Yeah, he did the same thing to me too.
Okay, good.
So. Matter of fact, I was talking to him about something else, and then he...
Yeah, by the way. Yeah.
By the way.
So
back to the applicant, I guess.
No, but given my experience on the board, and as we process through this type of investigation and rule, law change, whatever, this is a 12-month to 24-month process, typically.
Well, the rule process definitely is. The law takes, as mentioned, if the organization proposes it and it moves through, it could move through next year in January, February, be signed by July.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
That's the law.
So
But that piece is in
about
their
a year
hands.
out.
It's out of our hands, but
Right.
yes, the organization would push it out in less than a year. So I think it's well worth having those conversations and starting that, because it sounds like a relatively new piece, but other states are moving on it, or their law never kept them from doing it.
Okay. So I guess what my understanding is that, like Frank mentioned, maybe this person could be licensed in another state and then come back to us with that reciprocal opportunity that we have. But in the interim, there's not a whole lot we can do for this person until we do actually have opportunity to do a law change.
And Wanda, we don't have, or they don't have the application in front of them yet, do we, for this person that they're talking
No,
about? Okay,
we just
okay.
said
Right,
you
you don't
don't
meet
meet
it. You don't meet it. So right now, that under those standards. But yes, if they had all the exams and everything and could apply for comedy, then on one-offs, you have some flexibility, and we've
Yes.
used that, so that would be the case.
Okay, well that's good. That's good to know. So there is an avenue to encourage licensure in the state by the one-off opportunity.
Comedy, correct? If this person chose to come in
I
through
was
comedy.
just thinking, if she came in as comedy, but not have 3 years.
Still needs 3 years, right. She still would need the 3 years.
Okay, so the three.
Close enough by that time.
Yeah, yeah, she is.
So the 3 years is going to be our standard right now. So regardless of what happens, it's the 3-year rule. Okay. All right. Well, I think we got to let's pursue that.
Yeah, and do we need to touch base with NCARB to get that? Is that the organization you mean that they need to bring it?
No, it would be our Tennessee local chapters in our organization and lobbying. So yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right. That's a good conversation. So we're gonna wait back from staff, and we'll probably have something for our October retreat. Is that what or before that?
We can discuss it some more. However, I think
Okay.
the committee is in agreement to pursue this, so we would need to reach out to the organizations, and we can do that outside of a
Okay.
board meeting
All
just
right,
to
good.
propose.
So-
And I'm sure, in general, the members wouldn't oppose it either, and it'd be something that they would present to the representatives.
Okay. Good. So that's how we're going to
We
travel
move it,
with it.
yes.
All right. Well, good. All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Rick, I have one other question regarding IPAL. We've got 2 architectural schools in Tennessee and working on a 3rd one, I think, none of which have an IPAL program. And this is just a question we probably need to ask the university, but is there a reason, do they just not want to, or are there legal reasons they can't?
Ask them, but it could be they already know, that's what the state of Tennessee.
But at this point,
So this-
we have in the university.
This year wouldn't be the year that they present on behalf of the grants. That's not to say that we can't invite them. So that was, when we had the presentations last year, we talked about having the universities here more often. And I sent out an email thanking everybody for coming, and with that questionnaire on behalf of the board, that the board was interested in seeing if they would want to come out. More than half responded. Probably, we've got 17 universities, but between all the deans, more than half responded that yes, it'd be something they'd consider, just that it would be nice to continue conversations. So for the October meeting, we definitely, today with the full board, are going to look at our topics, and if we want to reach out and invite all the universities, not necessarily follow up because they need to come in and present for the grants, but just to come in and have those conversations, I think our 3-day time span would allow that and could be very productive. Those that are interested come, and those that can't or fit it in, then it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but we'd have some conversations about these things, and at that point it may be worth reaching out to the architecture university and saying we want to discuss on this that's new, because if we're moving forward a law like that, or someone is, it'd be really nice to hear their process so that it isn't left out from Tennessee.
Bring up the other subject now?
Please do. I think we're
So the next one was an applicant that we had that they only were registered in Tennessee they let their license expire, and we ended up looking at it as if it was a new, like they were a new exam applicant, and I kind of scuffled through it, but I wanted to bring that up to ask you guys and for us to talk about that just a little bit more, because I was that was a little confusing to me in trying to get all the pieces together, because they had taken the test before, but yet we were kind of looking at them as if they were taking it again. So maybe it's just a little clarity for me, maybe the main thing, but I don't know I don't know if you guys looked at it, but we all looked at it. So anyway. And I don't know if Wanda, if you want to weigh in on that one too first. So.
Yeah, I was confused about that myself. So.
Some time ago, you said someone who does not. Tennessee was the only state they'd been registered in, but that had expired, so they can't get an NCARB record without being registered. They can't get registered without an NCARB record. So you were allowing them to come in and treating them as an exam candidate. So we pulled information from their old file to let you know that they did meet requirements when they were registered here before.
What I wasn't sure was why they couldn't be just a reapply. They let it expire, and why couldn't they just?
Because they don't have an NCARB record. Record without the registration.
Catch 22.
Can't get the registration without the record.
Basically, we did it to help them kind of get their record established, so that they can get an NCARB now, I guess. Okay, that was a tough one just for me to sift through. But you made it sound a lot simpler.
But we, excuse me, please refresh my memory. We don't absolutely require an NCARB record to get licensed in Tennessee, do we? We do. Okay.
It's in the law.
It's in the law. Okay, I'm sorry. But this person had been previously registered, therefore we have a history on this person, and we can have flexibility in regard to renewing that license. Reinstating.
As you said, and we think of as an exam candidate, an exam person would not have a record yet. So
I see where you're going. I'm sorry. I got it. Thank you. Now I'm not confused as much as I was. So.
Yeah, that's what I said. That was kind of simple.
And you know me, I'm confused a lot. So, okay.
Well, yeah, that's all I
All
had.
right. I think I have not responded to that. I've got that ready to send back in because there were some applicants for taking their exam, and that was the only licensure one I believe on there. Okay. So, has anyone responded to that?
I responded. I kind of sifted through it, but I just wanted us to talk about it tomorrow.
Did you approve it?
I did.
And
yeah.
you? Okay, so you have 2 out of 3 approvals. So I'll get on that tomorrow. But you can move forward. Thank you. All right. Anything, or do we have any other business?
If I could touch on something that you just mentioned, Rick, regarding the NCARB record, that you questioned, is that something we have to have? And so that you bring up a good point. It is in the law. Therefore, it's not something that we normally would touch. But if this change for the IPAL and an EASE and fewer barriers to get into license opens up the law, that could be something that the committee wants to think about as well. And I'm only bringing that up from the perspective of the NCARB record's fantastic. So we of course, and you do the same, we can skip through it. We know where everything is. So I don't want to take away from its value, but in particular for those reinstatements or reapplies that may be due to no fault of their own, and I've spoken to at least 3 of these individuals, changes in the profession, leaving the industry for a while, semi-retiring, someone else handled the business and forgotten to renew, and now we've got to reinstate at a stage where getting that record, you never had that record. That is it's posed for us some difficult conversations of now you need to go back to create that record. It's got a financial piece to it, time consuming and so forth. So if you determined that it wasn't a must, that it obviously was preferable, then we could stay in that. But that might be a time to think about that change and not make it mandatory, because it does definitely hinder or at least add a lot to the reinstatement folks, without a doubt. Someone just coming into the industry, it's a huge benefit because they're going to carry it everywhere. They're still mobile. They're going from state to state. They actually probably value it immensely. But if someone's waited till their mid-70s to 80s, and the 2 or 3 that are in my mind are there, getting that record at this stage is something they don't view they'll be needing, and now it's delayed them because they, were ready otherwise. Does that make sense?
Are you referring to the mid-70s and 80s as the age or the years?
The age.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I certainly probably wouldn't have one if I were. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I'm just checking.
Yes.
I don't know. I truly value the NCARB record because we practice in 42 states, and it's without that I'm
Right.
dead in the water. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it's an absolute must to have that. But to someone that's a single practitioner may not have that because they were licensed prior to that, and then when they for whatever reason their license expires or lapses or whatever, getting that reinstated can be a problem. But instead of picking and choosing whether we want to honor the NCARB record or not, I mean, I think the language gives us the opportunity to make that exception, though. Currently, right? As a board, we can't take that.
I don't think so. I think it's pretty clear that you must have an NCARB record.
Could you have our legal people look into what
Absolutely.
it would take to give us some flexibility in that?
And if we are there, and it is correct, what you must have, and this law was the piece that's opening to where we could consider it, a change that would maybe you must have an NCARB record or have had a license for 30 plus years, whatever that magical number is, because those are the individuals, those reinstatements at that stage in life are the hard ones to, because we understand something happened and now you're back here. So we will definitely do research on that. That way by October, when we're looking at before the next session, what makes sense to do, it can be thought through.
That's good.
I like the or.
Right.
I
Well,
like
just
that.
if it gives us that flexibility
Yeah.
that we need, then I think that's important. I don't think we're going to, or I wouldn't support doing away with the NCARB record, but having some flexibility as the state of Tennessee, I think that's important. So, all right, that's good.
Talked about that quite some time ago. I'm thinking that it's possibly in a rule.
Research
Thought about it, so
will
I
be
haven't
good.
looked.
Possibly what one?
About treating them like an exam candidate, like we're doing this person that you're discussing now.
Anyway,
I'd have to look.
But it's definitely a little research is going to help clear this up. So we may be okay. So. All right. Anyone else? Comments? Questions? None? Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. We were 4 minutes early.
good job, you guys.
Yeah, I'm putting a little pressure on somebody back there to run a meeting tight.
Miss something, forget something. Encourage me, whatever, you know?
Oh, no. Look, blind leading the blind.
We are on the record. Chairman Parker, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. This is the meeting of the State of Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners. Today's date is August the 8th, 2019. It's a few minutes after 9 o'clock a.m. And we are meeting in the Davy Crockett Tower, Conference Room 1A, 500 James Robertson Parkway, Nashville, Tennessee, 37243. So, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to call the meeting to order, and let's have roll call, please.
Susan Ballard.
Here.
Robert Campbell.
Here.
Ricky Bursai.
Here.
Grant Minshew. Blair Parker,
Here.
Brian Tibbs,
Here.
Rick Thompson,
Here.
Frank Wagster,
Here.
Kathy Ware,
Here.
Alton Heathcote, Stephen King.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we begin, I would like to take a minute to thank Robert Campbell for his guidance, his service as chairman this past year. We appreciate all you've done, and in conversation with him yesterday, I felt that he's going to miss this. So I just want to offer to him that if he wants to, assist or actually come in and come back to this position, he's certainly welcome to.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer, but I think this will be my contribution to trying to get the profession of landscape architecture to improve their profile by letting them chair. But if you
I like
falter,
that.
I'm here to take up the slack. If you
I
need
like
to.
that. Well, we do appreciate you and all that you do for us. Anyway, let's shift over to acknowledging our guests. I think we have one guest in the house, Don. And announcements.
If I could, I do have one announcement, and this is regarding our public board member, Grant Minshew. His term had expired June 30th, 2019. You do continue to serve, but he had things that had come up, so he did want to thank the board and wanted me to read this on the record. He says, "Thank you so much for the hard work that the A&E board does. I enjoyed getting to know each of you and have great respect for the time and commitment you give to the state." So we will be looking for a public board member, but he was very sad to not be able to keep coming, at least for a while. Just different things clashed with his time and his schedule. That I wanted to let everyone know. And then the other piece is regarding the sunset hearing for the A&E board. I believe we touched on it at the last meeting, but I don't want to get to the end and then forget. That hearing is set for August the 21st. That's next week, and I believe that's a Wednesday. I'm going to double check. We're scheduled at 9 a.m., and sometimes, of course, we don't get heard until later in the morning, but at least right now, that's the time that we will be there, and I wanted to make sure that the board has a chance to think about the representation. We need one member from the board, and I had kind of checked schedules and checked with Chairman Parker, so he is available to go on behalf of the board that day, and just making sure that everyone here knows and that we're okay with that.
We need to say anything formally or go ahead, or is that just?
I think being the chair, I think we're okay. Stuart, I don't think we need a motion. Yeah, as long as you're able to. I really appreciate it, Blair. We're having the pre-meetings now. We started them last week. Everything's going fine. We've given the questionnaires and some of our reports that they ask for. So far it looks good, and we'll be in touch. If anything changes on the agenda, I'll get that to you.
Thank you. And to that end, those who have been through the sunset, it's interesting. This whole process can probably give me some ideas to what I'm walking into, because I've never participated in one of these. So any advice would be greatly appreciated from anyone.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. The only other piece, and so I noticed this late yesterday, and it's just with other things going on in the last 2-3 weeks. Our agendas, of course, post a week in advance, as you saw, but I did not send the agendas to our organization, so hopefully they will all be here, and it's not due to me forgetting to send them the agendas that we don't have them here. But it occurred to me late last night that normally they get the agendas shortly after you do, and then if they need any paperwork, they do ask for those. But so we should be. I didn't have anything else.
All right. Thank you. In review of the agenda, does anybody have anything to add? Seeing none, we'll leave the agenda as is, and we'll move forward. We'll begin with the minutes of the 2019 June board meeting. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes? Any questions? Any comments? Anything we need to address? Further clarifications?
To approve?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes as submitted.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Approved. Professional society reports.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Don Baltimore, representing Tennessee Interior Design Education and Advocacy. I'm glad to be here this morning. We do not have a lot to report. We are working on, unfortunately, we have to work on finding a successor for Susan. Her term ends next year, so we've been very fortunate to have her, and we have her for a few more months. And we have no legislation as of right now we're looking at, but are willing and able to support the board and the other associations in any matters that need our support. Thank you.
Yes.
Actually, Kate's will not be at the meeting today, but she did send Rick, Brian, and I update on what the AI would report today, so I'll just read that off real quick.
Okay.
First item, this is from Ashley now. We had about 250 attendees at the conference this past July in Knoxville. We recognized newly licensed architects from June the 1st to December the 31st at our awards presentation and offered them a complimentary registration. That's registration to the convention. Thanks to the Tennessee Architectural Foundation for their support. AIA Tennessee recently adopted a new strategic plan with focus on emerging professionals, advocacy, and awareness of the profession. It says she can provide more detail at the meeting in October. The RFQ versus RFP, it would be nice to have clarification about when architects are allowed to provide a fee. And she sent some emails of some RFPs that had been sent, which when they contacted them, they revised them where they didn't have fees as part of the it really should be an RFQ. QBS manual, there's only one reference now online. This is great. Thank you for making that happen. We'll include the QBS manual in our August newsletter to members. Do you think the licensing board could also send out an email to licensed professionals about the posting via their communication tools? State NCARB licensing advisor, AIA Tennessee, has a new licensing advisor, Mr. Cody Rao, AIA. Cody recently attended the NCARB summit and is looking forward to his new role. I'll extend an invitation to him to attend the October meeting with me so he can meet you. Cody works for DIA out of Nashville under Greg Campbell, who was the former AIA Tennessee president. And she had a question of when the term architectural associate, will it be approved by the SOS as being official? And then the last item she had was the AIA Tennessee Board of Directors meet in September. So if there are specific needs, let her know and what she needs to address for the licensing board, such as the definition of architecture. And that was her report. Thank you.
And within that report, there was actually a question in that report as to whether the state of Tennessee, whether we could send notification out of the QBS manual to our licensees.
So we've got two different methods with which we could do that. The first one that we very easily get out is through the Get Notified. So hopefully all the board members are signed up for that Get Notified feature. A lot of licensees maybe already have signed up, as well as the general public. That just simply means that you want to be informed about certain professions, and it could be all of the regulatory professions. That we can do because people have actually asked us to communicate with them, right? And so that's fairly simple, and legal can draft something, for your information. You've asked to receive information about the Architects and Engineer program, and did you know this guide was out there? And we can provide a link. So that's available. Separately, we have a program that's called Emma, not to try to get in the weeds and give you too much, but it's fairly interesting. There we could take all of our licensees' emails and do, I call them courtesy emails of information, and we would let them know you're being informed because you're a licensee and this information's out there. That needs a little bit of special approval, but I think given that this guide that was put together was so important and worked on, and it affects their statutes of their license, it could be something we can look at. So the get notified can be pretty quickly. The second piece I can start working on, and if able to, get it out before October. If not, update you in October when it'll go out. And that's literally it's a do not reply kind of email, but I can grab all 21,000 active licensees, and I bet you most of them do have emails, and say, this guide's out there. It's on our website. So it's a two-part thing, and one we can do pretty quickly. Does that answer the question? I think she makes a good point.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Very good? Okay.
Got one more. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Ridley.
I didn't know you could mail them in, members of the board. That's pretty cool. I have to ponder that. Good morning. I'm Nathan Ridley. I'm here on behalf of the Tennessee chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects. Y'all have rearranged the seating chart for the board. It's a little different here, so congratulations for the new officers of the board. I guess y'all always expect a little bit of civics, so we'll do a little bit of civics. We have a new House Speaker in waiting. The House Republican Caucus has met in late July, and they have chosen Cameron Sexton of Crossville, Tennessee, in Cumberland County to be their nominee for Speaker. And y'all know that we have a significant majority of Republicans. So I'm thinking on August the 23rd, Friday, August the 23rd, he will be chosen by the full House when they meet in special session here in Nashville. And hopefully that'll get us past some of the drama that we've had since the actual session ended on May the 2nd. On the local level, y'all have some elections going on. We're in a runoff phase here in Nashville, and the turnout, the turnout really drops when we get to that runoff election, because in Nashville, under our charter, a candidate has to receive a majority of the votes cast. And you would say, well, why do we do that? That's a pain in the fanny. They got more votes than other people. Why don't they win? I think it tends to bring people back to the middle, because you have to run against just two people, so consensus emerges for our community. Important. And y'all know that local governments do infrastructure. I mean, that's what we're good at. We educate our children, we put in infrastructure. So it's important to this group as well. Here in Nashville, we're having a reception for elected officials at all levels on August the 15th. We're going to show off the Ascend Amphitheater right downtown, and we're excited about that. We will add, the landscape architect folks will add to their next newsletter a link to the QBS material we all have discussed. And I think we can I'm about to tell you more than I know here, but I think we can put a link to that on our website as well. It's above my pay grade, but I think that's within the realm of possibility. And it's noted on your material that our national conference is coming up in San Diego in November. We have a new slate of officers that we're in the process of electing now for our chapter. We have a nominating committee that creates a slate for that, so it's not quite as contested as a local political election. And that's what I have. It's good working with y'all. Again, congratulations on the new officers. I look forward to working with you. Happy to respond to your questions or comments.
Thank you, Nathan. If I can add one thing, the Advocacy Day that's taking place here in Nashville on the 15th, August the 15th. It's also taking place in Memphis and on the east side of the state. So Tennessee ASLA has stepped the game up and getting a little more active around the state, I believe. So thank you.
Thank you.
Case report.
Good morning, board members. This is Shalina Brown. I will go through the legal report I believe it's on your iPads. I'm not sure of the page number.
24?
First item is number 1, complaint number 2019053-981. This complaint involves a professional engineer. A complaint was filed against the respondent for failure to provide a report for an inspection of a foundation. The complainant contacted the respondent and was told by the respondent that it would be provided. Thereafter, the complainant had not received the report and continued to try to reach the respondent. However, the respondent wouldn't respond to phone calls, texts, or emails. The respondent did provide us with a response, and he said that he suffers from migraines, and due to recent medication change, he was unable to work, and that was the reason for the delay. The respondent provided the report to the complainant. A short time thereafter, the complainant did send our office an email requesting withdrawal of the complaint. This complaint was reviewed by board member Stephen King. Mitigating factors is that the report was provided to the complainant. My recommendation is to close this case.
Thank you. We've heard the case. We see the recommendation to close. Any discussion? I entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The next complaint number 2, complaint number 2019054451. This involves a professional engineer. The respondent's registration had expired on June 30th, 2018, and the respondent reapplied on March 1st, 2019. The respondent did note that the respondent had practiced engineering on an expired license, but in a follow-up email, the respondent stated that the respondent had actually not practiced under an expired license and was employed by a large corporation as a design engineer. The respondent stated he had stamped the drawings for a business prior to the expiration of the license. After the license expired, the respondent was contacted by the contractor for the project requesting moving a unit location to another area, and it required the respondent to resubmit a stamped letter stating it could be moved so long as it met the equipment manufacturer's guidelines. The respondent only issued a letter during the period the license was expired. The complaint was reviewed by board member Stephen King. Mitigating factor is that the respondent self-reported. My recommendation is to authorize a civil penalty in the amount of $500 for unlicensed practice to be settled informally by consent order, with authority to proceed to a contested case proceeding if the respondent does not agree to the informal settlement.
Thank you. We've heard the case. We've seen the recommendation. Any discussion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next.
The next complaint number 3, complaint number 20190549991. This complaint involves a professional engineer. The respondent's registration expired on February 28th, 2018, and the respondent realized it had been expired on February 19th, 2019. The respondent immediately reapplied and is currently licensed. The expired license affidavit submitted by the respondent stated the respondent had sealed several specifications in engineering studies. However, after discovering the license was expired, no documents were sealed by the respondent. A list was provided by the respondent. There were 8 projects that were sealed. This complaint was reviewed by board member Alton Heathcote. Mitigating factor is that The respondent self-reported. My recommendation is to authorize a civil penalty in the amount of $500 for unlicensed practice to be settled informally by consent order with the authority to proceed to a contested case proceeding if the respondent does not agree to the informal settlement.
Okay, we've heard the case and the recommendation. Any discussion? Mr. Thompson?
Excuse me. This is very similar to several cases we've heard in the past where there are multiple documents being sealed by the engineer or architect whose license was expired for a full year, and he just discovered that it was expired, and the recommendation for a $500 penalty doesn't fall in line with our previous fines, if you will. Do we have any idea about the number of documents that was sealed by this engineer? I don't care if it's specifications or drawings. It's a document with a seal on it. So has that been determined?
Yes, sir. There were 8 that were sealed. 8 projects.
Did I miss that? Yeah. I'm sorry. 8. Okay. With 8 having been sealed, then my comment is, are we going to stand by our usual 8 documents at a certain amount of money per document, or are we going to go with a $500? So just bring that up for discussion because it's not in keeping with what we have done in the past, especially at our last meeting. So thank you.
I think we're going to make the same comment. But
Are you? Okay,
I
Robert.
think kind of what the head was nodding, but I think I agree with Mr. Thompson. I mean, we've had our standard policy is based on the number of projects, and I think there's 8, so 8 times 500 is 4,000 to me. So we did that at last meeting, I believe, where somebody had 20, if I remember right, 20 something, and so I mean, we need to make sure that we're consistent with where we are, and you know, these projects may be specifications, but you're exactly right, Rick. I mean, they're still a violation of the stamp law. They're still per project, and you know, whether it's a letter, a specification, or anything, those things still have the same amount of weight to impact the public health, safety, and welfare. So my recommendation would be to go along with the 4. I'll make a quick motion well, let me wait and let Kathy speak, and then I'll make a motion.
Kathy?
Yeah, that was basically what I was going to ask also, but by just to clarify, Shalina, in the future, if you can put those details in there for us, and then we won't have to delve into it, but was it 8 reports, 8 seals? And the reason I ask is because in some cases we've had multiple sheets that have been sealed, and each sheet has represented a violation unto itself. So is it 8 projects, 8 seals, 8 sheets of paper? I'm just curious.
Let me just read directly from what the respondent provided. 1 second.
Okay, great.
The respondent says the following is a list of projects, including the client and date, that I sealed, not realizing my license had been expired. And those are 8 projects.
Can you read the project names to us?
Sure. Memphis Light, Gas and Water, Arc Flash Risk Assessment, Newport Utilities, Advanced Metering Infrastructure Specifications, Cookeville Electric Department, Advanced Metering Infrastructure Specifications, Milan Department of Public Utilities, and Advanced Metering Infrastructure Specifications. I believe the way it's just listed in a list, it's 8, but it looks like the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Specifications is the description of the project. So there are actually 5 projects, not 8.
But we didn't review exactly what he says. I mean, we didn't see what he says.
No, we're relying
on his self-reporting.
Yeah,
Okay.
the self-reporting and the truthfulness of the respondent.
Is that what we've always done?
Yes.
Might I suggest we let this one move to the next meeting? Alton reviewed this, and it would be good to hear, I think, what his, if he's looked at it more in depth, I think it'd be good to hear what he has to say about this project. Do you have any kind of written response?
Provided a full response explaining the situation.
Did Alton?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't believe so.
I think it'd be good to hear from him before we move on this particular issue. I so move.
Second. We have a motion and a second to delay this or defer this to the next meeting, which I believe will be October. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? So we'll delay this or defer this till the next meeting. I'd like to add my 2 cents. I'm like the new guy around here with regard to these types of things. I see an individual who made a mistake, and they realized they made a mistake, and they self-reported, hopefully in an honest type way, as opposed to fudging the numbers, which I don't doubt some people may do from time to time. And I'm wondering if $500 per document is not a high number. That's just me speaking. And where this really goes to is our last meeting. There was one I think you referenced that was a very hefty number, and realize we do this to protect. That's my opinion. I may be the lonesome soldier on this one, but that's how I feel about this. I wonder if we don't need to evaluate that $500.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, this is the life safety of this public. Whether that number is the final number we come up with is up to the board, but this is the way that we have operated, and I'm not trying to correct you. I'm just being on the record here that if it's $500 or if it's $250 and it's for 8 occasions or 3 occasions, the penalty will fit the crime. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ricky.
One other comment, just we're trying to be consistent with what we do, and I think on these cases where somebody is not licensed, we have been assessing the $500 per project. Like the last meeting, there was 21 projects where we came up with the $10,000. It wasn't the number of sheets, I believe. I think the number of sheets come into play when there's a different kind of rule infraction, like improper stamping, like you used somebody else's stamp or you stamped something that you weren't, that you shouldn't be, you didn't have the right knowledge to stamp. I think that's when we've done the per sheet, but I think these out-of-date licenses have been per project, I think. Just
Board members, I'd just like to mention that, of course, you have the discretion under the law to assess a penalty per violation, and how you're determining that definition of per violation is to your discretion. When I make the recommendation, I assess the entire unlicensed period as the violation. Leave it at that.
And if I could ask a question maybe relating to this exact situation when an individual self-reports. I believe we've been consistent, but I wouldn't guarantee it because sometimes our person self-reporting doesn't give us an exact number. So, if you all say we've always been consistent, then by all means, I do believe that. But I know that if they don't give an exact number, there's really no way for us to know how many projects they've done. And I don't know if that's worth anything. And then the other question would be, does it matter if the project was one page and very small or a $3 million project? I mean, it's, again, we're relying on their self-reporting, and Shalina pointed out, which I think is huge, why her $500 recommendations there. It's based on the violation of an expired license. So we'll take whatever guidance the board decides moving forward, but just some things to think about. I don't know that we've ever assessed continuing education instead of just the civil penalty, or we want to stick to just the civil penalty. All those options would be there at your discretion.
Shalina, may I ask, in your interpretation of this one scenario being one event, so for someone to have two events, what would that mean? How would someone have two events?
They wouldn't necessarily. It would be just the violation of unlicensed practice. I feel as though, too, that to really look into the matter, meaning determine whether they're being truthful with us. I mean, we're relying on what they're providing us in a response and, trusting that they're being truthful. So there could be occasion where they're not truthful, and for us to investigate that would be kind of a huge undertaking, too.
Just have a comment. Each time they stamp the drawing and their license is expired is a violation. Whether it's over a 6-month period or a 1-year period or a 1-month period, it's still the same violation as we see it. So that's all.
I was going to kind of say what Susan said. I think the other way to look at it is if we never renew our license, there's no penalty in that. That means that's the way we kind of let our license expire in a state that we want to drop. It's not until we do a project, even enter into agreement to do a project, that then that's a violation. And I would argue that every time you agree to enter any kind of project, whether it's a report or study or a $100 million job, that you're practicing on a new project for a new client. And so I would just for consideration of legal, that's why I think we look at it as each project. The other thing I'll mention is our chart that we have shows that the normal fine is $750. $500 is with mitigating factors. So just for what that's worth.
Robert?
So I just want to point out, again, a couple quick things. If you look in our rules, number 3 says each day of continued violation may constitute a separate violation. So, I mean, in theory, I suppose we could say it's 365 days times $500 if we wanted to. We also have self-reporting. Cooperation is a mitigating factor that may allow us to do some different stuff here. But the one that I wanted to point out is where the amount imposed will be a substantial economic deterrent to the violation. My fear is that a $500 penalty is, for one project, is a deterrent, but for 8, whatever the number ends up being, we need to have a substantial economic deterrent to the violation, because people need to understand this is serious and it's not simply a slap on the wrist and you get out of trouble with what you're doing. And I will point out, it was a few years ago, speaking of project size, we took somebody's license away because they were doing a mobile home inspection. This came up yesterday. They did a lot of mobile home inspections, and we didn't think they'd actually done them. They did like 200 in a 6-month period or something. I mean, it was a crazy number, and it looked like they were just sitting in their office writing it up. And so those projects, they were probably getting paid $500 or $600 a project. but we took their license away based on that, even those are tiny projects, but they still put the public at risk every time they improperly did that activity. So I would say that the size of the project matters very little. You could be doing some sort of bolt diagram for something that you're paid for $1,000 for, but if those bolts are put in improperly, the entire structure could fall down. So I don't think that the size matters of the project. It's a violation, and I'd just say we need to be consistent with what we've got written down here in our rules for those factors. And I will yield the rest of my time to the gentlewoman from Nashville to my right, who had her placard up just a minute ago.
Kathy?
Gentlewoman. Is that the best you can come up with?
That's what I hear him say on TV.
I think everything I was going to say was already been said. That's why I put my placard down. But the only thing I would add is I think the reason we're having this conversation is because Alton's not here. So it kind of points out to us, all of us, how important it is that we have the input from each other when we're making these decisions, and how much we value each other's opinion. Because if Alton was here, he'd probably answer all these questions for us very, very quickly. So in the future, we might even want to consider that if the person who reviewed the case is not going to be able to attend the board meeting, we might want to just automatically defer. Because we're going to have questions on almost every one of them. I can't. There's very few of these cases that come before us that we don't ask questions. So that might be something we want to think about, Roxana.
Maybe, sorry. Or maybe at least make sure they do a little report for us. There may be some cases where it can be cleared up.
And in the case of Alton, I think he had every intent to participate telephonically. I think you all would. So I don't know that we'd ever pull the case, because sometimes the board member won't make it to the meeting due to something unexpected. But
if you know they're not going to be here.
Yeah.
And obviously no criticism of Alton.
Right,
So
right,
we all
right.
miss
We'll
things
still
when we
present it.
don't want to. Yeah.
Healthy discussion. Thank you. Anything additional? Okay, so that item, which I believe is item 3, has been deferred to October. Let's move on to the next.
Item 4, complaint number 2019054-531. This involves a professional architect. The respondent was sanctioned by NCARB with a formal private reprimand. In that case, the respondent had failed to report a prior disciplinary action in 2 other jurisdictions within the required time period. The respondent provided us a response and stated the board had been advised upon the respondent's initial licensure in Tennessee in 2011 of all disciplinary actions taken against the respondent in all jurisdictions. This complaint was reviewed by board member Brian Tibbs. A mitigating factor here is that the original complaint opened by NCARB against the respondent was closed with a formal letter of reprimand. My recommendation is to close.
For the case, we have a recommendation to close. Any discussion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion to approve and second. Any further discussion? Yes.
Since this was reviewed by Brian, maybe we should hear from Brian to just see if there's anything.
I don't have anything to add.
And you agree with the seconded, so. Okay. We have a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Number 5 and 6 are somewhat companion cases. They're quite lengthy, but I'll go through briefly the facts in the complaint. It's complaint number 2019055-791. It involves a professional engineer. This complaint was filed against the respondent by a former employer. The allegations by the employer was that the respondent had lied about working in an engineering firm, copied hundreds of confidential files and proprietary information to external drives and loaded them onto the new employer's computer system, conspired with other former and soon-to-be former employees to extract other proprietary information, stole customer drawings from the complainant employer, changed login credentials for the complainant employer's Autodesk Vault workgroup, which gives access to the complainant employer's computer systems from the new employer system and locked out complainant employer from the Vault server, used photos of the complainant employer tests to mark the respondent's LinkedIn account, stole vendor pricing files, stole job invoicing logs for engineering and testing projects going back 7 years, wiped the laptop clean and reset it to the factory settings, and destroyed company property. The complainant employer had to hire a third-party forensic IT professional to restore the laptop that was returned to the complainant employer to show file paths to confirm all computer activity that was engaged in by the respondent. The respondent provided a 5-page detailed response to us and stated that the complainant employer has misrepresented facts and circumstances surrounding the departure of the respondent. This was quite a complicated situation. The respondent stated that all the licensed engineers working in their Memphis, Tennessee office of the complainant employer had resigned in March of 2018. The complainant employer had also instituted legal proceedings against not only the respondent but the new employer as well as another former employee of the complainant employer's firm. The complainant employer had been unable to prove any confidential information had been stolen by the complainant. The respondent explained that it was routine to back up the respondent's laptops while they were working for that employer. There was no taking of any information and downloading it. There was no proof of any confidential documents being stolen, and the IT expert confirmed that documents were not stolen. There were no documents on the laptop that were deemed to be confidential information either. This complaint was reviewed by board member Robert Campbell, Jr. Mitigating factors are the respondent has no prior history of disciplinary action or any prior complaints filed against the respondent during the respondent's engineering career. The complainant employer had waited 16 months to file this complaint with this board against the respondent. My recommendation is to close this complaint.
Heard the complaint, see the recommendation. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Sorry, Robert?
Maybe a miscommunication, but I don't think I sent anything back on that. I've not had a chance I read the report, but I've not had a chance to really sit down and formulate a response to this. So I don't know that I have a formal recommendation. I read it. Your facts seem to be in line here from what I've read, but I really just didn't have time to delve into the details of this case. And I definitely want to defer this because, I was not able to provide any kind of written response. We had a lot of applications to review this month, which took up my normal board time. So I would respectfully ask the board if we could defer this because, again, miscommunication because I didn't send anything back to you. I said I would review it, but I had not sent here's what I found on there. So I want to make sure that that's clear and that we get that taken care of.
Board members, in light of Mr. Campbell's request, I would also recommend that we defer the following one since they're companion cases, and the following case was reviewed by board member Ricky Bursey.
We have a recommendation to defer this till next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Just for clarification on the two cases, can you just tell us how the two cases are related? There's two respondents. The complainant, I assume, is the same person, and the two respondents are two different people?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And those two people now work together at a second firm?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. I didn't want to assume that. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and second to defer. Any additional questions, comments? Ricky?
Real quick. Shalina, I know that we looked at this and talked or emailed, and my memory is there was maybe some the civil case had not been finalized yet, but am I correct on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I think in my comment was since there was so much proof about one party says this and the other party says the exact opposite, I was thinking we would wait until the civil case was complete because they go over the evidence there and before we decided what to do here. Do you know the timing on that?
No, I don't. It's been going for quite some time. I know the parties were attempting to settle. There was some dispute about some costs being reimbursed by the respondents to the complainant employer.
That may have moved a little bit since you and I talked. I think when we talked, I don't think they had settled or
They have
started
not
negotiating.
settled. They haven't settled. They were attempting to
They
settle.
were attempting. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'm sorry, Kathy Ware.
Robert pushed me in the corner, and I'm totally irrelevant now.
Correction, gentlewoman from Nashville. Robert had nothing to do with setting up this room. So let's make that on the record before I get more crap associated with my name. Thank you.
But you're so deserving. My only question is, again, directed to Ricky and Robert more than Shalina, is there anything to be concerned about relative to public health, safety, and welfare relative to this case? It seems that it is a case that involves ethics between two registrants and a complaint against one registrant against two other registrants or something like that. But is there anything that we should be concerned about relative to this is a pattern that would put the public at risk relative to behavior or I just want to get that out there, that we've considered that we haven't just deferred in a vacuum.
I'll answer on my side. My request for deferral is, again, I've read the complaint, but I've really not had time to formulate whether I believe that is what you just stated or if it is another issue. I've just not had time to sit down and formulate that. Obviously, if the allegations are true, I think that speaks to a character of an applicant or a registrant, which does create problems for the health, safety, and welfare. If you're willing to do this, and what are you not willing? But I've just not had time to formulate a response. So I couldn't answer that in any kind of definitive way.
I think it's possible, but I don't think we can go beyond what is presented in front of us, that one person says this, the other says that. They're exact opposite. Unless we have an investigator here to go interview and collect evidence. And my thought was that'll all come out in a civil case. And that's the best thing we can do, is the right thing. So, yeah, they may be at risk, but I don't know that we have
We can't quantify that risk.
and I don't know an alternative to getting to an answer that would be correct.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion. We have a motion and a second on the floor for clarification. We're approaching football season, I'm assuming.
Already.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Does that motion include both, to defer both of these? I thought you did.
I did. Okay. My motion is to defer both of the cases as per legal counsel.
And I will second that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
So we will be deferring items 5 and 6. Moving on to number 7, complaint number 2019027861. This involves a licensed architect, the respondent. I'm sorry, it's an unlicensed architect. The respondent and respondent firm engaged in providing services as an unlicensed architectural engineer firm, architect and engineer. That's how this was described in the complaint, in case you're wondering why it's referenced like that here, which can be a bit confusing. The complainant stated the respondent provided 2 estimates for proposed projects with the totals exceeding $25,000, An investigation was conducted by the department, and the respondent was non-cooperative. However, did admit to our investigator the respondent was unlicensed. This complaint was sent to the Investigations Division of the Department of Commerce and Insurance for investigation. The aggravating factor here is that the respondent refused to cooperate with our investigation. My recommendation is to authorize a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 for unlicensed practice for the individual and the firm by informal settlement by consent order, and authorization to file a formal contested case proceeding against the respondent.
We've heard the complaint. See the recommendation for clarification. You say the recommendation reads, authorize a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 for unlicensed practice for the individual and the firm. Is that $1,000 each?
When I made the recommendation, it was $1,000 total.
Okay. Rick?
Okay, questions? Excuse me. The individual who did the estimates, he was presenting himself as a licensed architect. I'm just trying to get the facts here.
There's never any reference in any of the documents of a licensed architect, meaning those words, but he held himself out as a licensed architect.
Oh, but he did. I mean, that's documented. Okay. That's the first question. The firm is a firm owned or operated by licensed professionals, architects, engineers?
No, sir.
Yes?
No, sir.
No, it's not. So the firm is not licensed.
No.
The person is not licensed. Is the firm owned by the person who's not licensed?
Yes, but it's not a corporation or legal entity. It was just the doing business as name of the individual that was operating unlicensed. It was just the name being used.
Okay, so totally non-compliant. Okay. Now, all right. We have two estimates. That's twice of, back to your comment earlier, of the penalty that may be assessed. So I don't have my information in front of me. Ricky, do you have anything in there that might guide us on that?
What this says for unlicensed practice, that the normal is $750, $1,000 is aggravating factor per violation, and $500 is mitigating factor per violation. And the other comment is often accompanied by a cease and desist order.
That is my question. I want to get that out before additional comments are made, and I give the floor to you, Kathy. No?
I love you, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
I appreciate you acknowledging my existence.
Nobody puts Kathy in the corner.
You better believe it. This baby is not going to get pushed into the corner.
I couldn't wait to say that. I just wanted to go on the record. I wasn't going to say baby, but now that you said it.
But you thought it.
Well, okay. We saw the same movie.
we were the same age when we saw that
yeah,
movie.
Thank you.
How is it this meeting's getting out of control?
Who's in charge here?
Yeah, who's in charge here?
Someone
anyway?
needs to establish order.
There we go. Let's bring this meeting to order, please.
So I have a couple of questions, too. One, is this a Tennessee firm, or is this a firm out of state trying to practice in Tennessee?
This is a Tennessee individual and firm.
So it's a Tennessee individual doing business as and representing themselves as an architect, or they offered architectural services?
Yes, ma'am.
And there's no engineer involved? I know you said that's what the complainant said, right? Okay. And is the complainant a private entity or a codes official, or how did we get the complaint?
The complainant is an individual that was provided the two estimates. It's one individual.
Potential customer?
Yes.
Okay. And it says totals exceeding $25,000. Is that total of two projects proposals exceed 25, or each project exceeds 25, or?
Yes, ma'am. Each project exceeds 25.
Each project exceeded 25. Okay. All right. So if we exercise our option to enforce a penalty and go to the formal case, is that the last option for a financial penalty, or is there, excuse me, is there further opportunity for additional financial penalties? Or I don't know. I haven't ever even sat through a case since I've been on the board. We haven't had one, so I don't know what the process is.
So if this case goes to a formal hearing at that time, the board can determine the penalty.
Additional penalties? If we say 1,000 now, additional penalties? Yes. Okay. Okay.
Susan.
Does this individual have an architectural degree?
No, ma'am.
Oh.
Right.
I was just kind of
new glasses or something, don't I?
I was just kind of perusing what our penalties. I mean, what our penalties might be, and there are several rules in here that look like to me are being violated, not just one. And like acceptance of work, and you're not registered, and making public statements, failure to be truthful, and I mean, if you're selling yourself as an architect and you're not, then you're not being truthful. Every one of these have an aggravating penalty of $1,000, and I ain't got knowingly provided false testimony, knowingly associating with or pertaining the use of one's name or a firm name in a fraudulent manner. All of these are different rules that are being, in my opinion, violated. And this is just quickly running over this, but I'm thinking we could go back through here. There are several rules that are being violated, not just one, and so I would think that it could be several $1,000 penalty. But like I'm saying, I ain't got time to sit down and go through all this.
Susan?
I have a question. Did the complainant provide evidence that they presented themselves as an architect?
The complainant provided the documents which indicated that this individual was unlicensed, and upon investigation, it was confirmed that they were an unlicensed architect. However, the respondent didn't cooperate, and that was the main issue, so we weren't able to get any additional information or proof. It's just the statement of the respondent to the investigator admitting that the respondent was unlicensed, an unlicensed architect.
I'll make a recommendation that we take this evidence to one of the members of the architecture committee and let them look at it further. Not that I want to give you all any more work, but I just think we need to have a little more information, because I agree with Frank. I think there's multiple things that have occurred here, mainly fraud, and so I think we need to look at it a little bit deeper. So
I will second that, and I agree. I was going to say too, can we defer, because it seems like there's more information to dig through.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer and a second to that. Any further discussion? Kathy?
Would it be appropriate to amend the motion to include that we direct legal to issue a cease and desist order immediately to the offending party, in addition to a deferral?
Susan, it's your motion.
I would like to add that as well, to include a cease and desist order, that they immediately stop work while we investigate.
Thank you.
This firm indicated they were architectural and engineering?
Their DBA indicates that.
There indicates that. Do we need just an architect? I'm not trying to make any business work for anybody else, but if it's primarily architecture, then it should be deferred to us. But if not, I mean, it could be a dual review if that's.
The work engaged in was architectural.
Okay, all right, that clears it up. Thank you.
Second the amended motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor to defer this to a future time and then assign a couple or someone from the architectural side? Robert, do you have a comment?
Yeah, defer and send a cease and desist, right?
Yes.
That is the motion.
That is
Okay,
the
just
motion.
wanna make sure.
That's correct. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Next item is number 8, complaint number 2019046431. I apologize in advance. This matter was not sent to an interior designer reviewer. The thrust of this complaint was mainly a he said, she said situation. However, I will go through the facts and defer to the board as to a decision. This complaint was filed by an interior design firm against an employee who began working for a new employer and had used pictures of work that was done by the complainant architectural firm on the new employer's website without giving proper credit for work to the firm or any explanation of responsibilities. There was also the allegation by the complainant firm that there was an exaggeration of responsibilities and the use of photography was without permission. The complainant claims the respondent only worked on projects indirectly while employed with the complainant, and the role was indirect because the respondent was a supervisor of employees that was doing the actual design, technical, and project management of the work. The complainant did send a cease and desist letter to the respondent prior to filing the complaint with our office. The respondent provided a response and stated that all the projects and photographs were removed immediately from the current employer's website and all computing equipment has been returned as requested in the cease and desist letter. This was a bit of an unusual situation because the respondent was continuing to work for the complainant employer firm on a consulting type basis. The respondent was under the impression there were no stipulations or limitations that were being imposed upon the complainant after leaving the firm and during the period the respondent was consulting for them, and was under the impression the respondent was free to use all the work to pursue other contract opportunities. The respondent stated the projects listed on the new employer's website were approved by the complainant's communications manager. My recommendation is to close upon issuance of a letter of caution to the respondent for the potential violations of 3 rules: not engaging in any form of false or misleading advertising, not using photographs or specifications of a project without the express permission of the client, and not misrepresenting or exaggerating the registrant's degree of responsibility in or for the subject matter of present or prior assignments.
Thank you. So we've heard the detail, description, and then the recommendation, and any discussion. Susan?
I was called by the respondent, so I have to recuse myself from this case. There's a lot more to this, and so after the meeting, if y'all want to hear about it, I'll be glad to tell you, but right now I can't tell you anything, so.
Okay.
I don't think that's appropriate either way after the meeting, so no,
I'm
thank
kidding,
you.
I'm sorry.
Rick?
I suggest we defer this or assign it to someone to review. Since it has not been reviewed, I don't think I can make a decision on it, especially in light of what you just said. So,
Is that a motion?
A motion.
Second.
Yes, that's a motion. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second to defer this.
Board members, just for clarification, since Board Member Ballard is the only interior designer board member, who would you like me to send this to review?
Who is the liaison? I'm sorry. Who's on the interiors?
Kathy?
I am.
Kathy and Frank? Okay. Just making sure that I didn't get it. No.
I saw
means
you
it
there.
should go to Rick.
I saw you.
Why couldn't Susan review it?
She's had to recuse
Because the
herself.
respondent called me in
Well,
tears.
I understand,
And told me
but I
about
mean,
the
part
case.
of this process is to investigate, right? I mean, and you're going to hear potentially from the complainant and the respondent anyway. It doesn't mean you, I mean, recusal is not the ability to give information, my understanding, in an open setting. It's that you can't vote. I mean, if she's already, we have these calls all the time where we sit there and listen to the respondent and the complainant give their side of the story. So, I mean, I don't know why she wouldn't be, if she already knows one side of the story, investigate
The
the other
information
side.
I know is basically what Shalana has said. I just know a few more details.
Well, and that's
So-
fine, but I think you know one side, and if you're gonna review it,
Yeah.
get the other side, and
And would you be able to be unbiased?
Yeah, I was going to say, unless
That's
she
the whole
feels
thing.
like she's.
I think that's the
right.
whole
I
thing.
mean, that's fine
I
too,
know
but a
where it's- I know where
recusal,
it
just you
stands.
don't vote.
The other thing I would just like to point out that Board Member Ballard does know the identity of the
All the parties.
parties, as well as you may be relying on her recommendation in making your decision too.
I know the identities of the people. I look at their cases too. I mean, just because she knows the identity doesn't
But
mean.
this one's very black and white.
Well, I mean, I
You
don't,
know,
I don't
so-
want to prejudge. I'm just saying that every time we review one of these cases, we know the identity of the people that we're reviewing, and that's why we recuse ourselves from voting. We just present the facts that's there in that case. So I think if you already know one side of it, I don't know why finding the other side of it and verifying the information and going on. I mean, I don't know what, we see these cases all the time with names on them, right? When you review a case. So I don't know the big deal, unless there's a personal relationship there.
Robert, I understand that. I do wonder, though, if it wouldn't be cleaner to assign this to another individual, then then Ms. Ballard can participate in that, but if someone else be assigned this. It just seems like a cleaner way to handle this from a legal side of things.
I'm about to say chairman, but yeah, I agree with you. I think let's just make it clean, that way they won't have to come back and say, well, I heard on the thing and she heard about it, I do agree with what you're saying, but let's just be clean. And it does say an architectural firm, so, one more thing we can add to ours, but I think it should stay clean. I agree with you.
Oh, well, we do have one architect on the Interior Committee. I would assume that would go to Mr.
I'll be
Wagster.
glad to if that's who you decide you want to look at it.
Was there a motion on the table?
Table. To table.
In a second, okay, thank you.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Next item, number 9. This involves an engineering firm. This was quite a lengthy complaint as well, with a lot of facts and allegations and he said, she said situation. This complaint was filed against the respondent for damage caused to the homeowner's foundation that was not properly disclosed by the respondent engineering company to the complainant. The complainant purchased a home and was instructed to get a structural engineering firm to check the foundation. The respondent issued a report and stated there was nothing to be concerned about, and the only thing necessary was to remove a tree in front of the house that was causing the basement wall under the office of the home to bow. When the complainant got the quote, the complainant was told the same company had been there before and there had been a previous report issued a month prior to when the complainant purchased the home, and that report was much more extensive and had substantially more information, including a cost projection of $4,000 for the installation of steel piers to correct the problem with the basement wall. Upon obtaining estimates for the structural repairs by the complainant found out that they were going to have to spend approximately $30,000 to fix the foundation. The respondent provided an extensive response and stated that the complainant was informed of the problems with the foundation in the report that was issued to the complainant. The report clearly identified the problems with the foundation walls and that the walls were failing due to extensive lateral pressure being applied to the walls. The report also stated there was a water intrusion problem in the crawl space that was affecting the elevation in the interior piers. The respondent does not provide estimate for the cost of repairs and directs all clients to contact a licensed general contractor to obtain an estimate for the work recommended in the report. The respondent stated if there had been any mention of cost to the complainant, it would have been clearly stated in the report, and they would have used a range of cost for the potential cost. According to the respondent, the allegation concerning the prior report being issued to the respondent has been misconstrued by the complainant. The respondent discussed this with the complainant and explained that the prior report was issued by the respondent firm, but it was performed by a different engineer. Both reports identified the foundation walls were failing and there was movement and settlement. The first report included a different scope of work, and that was the main difference between the two reports. The respondent had not been asked to evaluate any doors or separate floors by the complainant, and may not have existed at the time of the first inspection. The respondent could not share the previous report with the complainant because their contract for professional service specifically includes a confidentiality clause that prevents them from sharing the information from a previous site visit and report without the written permission of the respondent. Stated the scope of work with the complaint was clearly set forth in the contract and only included verifying piers in the crawl space being structurally sound, feasibility of turning the garage into the basement and adding a garage to the back of the home, and lastly, verifying whether two walls were not load-bearing walls. My recommendation is to close this complaint.
Discussion, Kathy Ware.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I take it that no one from the board reviewed this case either, Shalina?
Yes, this complaint was not reviewed, and mainly because of the facts that were presented in the complaint that was filed with us.
Okay. Well, I would suggest to you that the facts would, to me, indicate a conflict of interest by one of the parties, and that I would really want to know more before I would go along with a closure on this, because if the respondent knew as a firm, was the respondent the firm or the person?
Ma'am, the firm.
The firm. Well, if the firm had knowledge, they can't hide behind a confidentiality clause and not reveal information to another party on the basis of we can't tell you because somebody else already paid us money to keep it quiet. It just seems like this needs to be reviewed in great detail. I would be in favor of a deferral and a review and a representment.
Second.
Motion and a second on the floor to assign someone to review this and defer this to a later date. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That was item number 9.
Next, the representations. Number 10, complaint number 2019038131. This involves a professional architect. The board had deferred this matter to this meeting to find out additional information. This involved a self-reporting by the architect on an expired license. The respondent had explained that the respondent was not aware the license was expired until the respondent attempted to access the state fire marshal's portal and post a project. The respondent provided the additional information and stated that registration expired on September 28, 2018 and was renewed on April 11, 2018. During the period the respondent, 2019, during the period the respondent was unlicensed, the respondent signed 2 projects while the license was expired. One project was an architectural portion on a January 4th, 2019 project, and the second project was for mechanical renovations, and the architectural portion dealt with interior changes to a server room and other miscellaneous changes, and that was signed on July 12th, 2018. The primary function in both projects was the coordination of structural, mechanical, electrical, and fire protection engineering, along with partitions, ceilings, and miscellaneous interior changes.
I've got one question on this new information. Am I to understand his registration that expired on September the 28th, 2018? And if so, if he signed something on July the 12th, 2018, was he registered?
Our records indicate that the respondent was expired on June 30th, 2018. So the dates provided by the respondent are incorrect. So the second project of July 12th, 2018 was during the expired period.
So the new information needs to be updated, I suppose.
Yeah, so where it says new information, it says respondent's registration expired. Is that, did you intend to say the respondent claimed that his registration expired?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
That was the information provided by the respondent.
Okay, all right. So the respondent claimed that his registration expired after he had sealed one set of documents. Was he trying to get out of a penalty on that set, or do you?
There was no comment.
No comment on that? Okay. I'd also just like to point out that in the ongoing discussion about definition of engineering and architecture, that I think there is a consensus that, excuse me, the definition of either practice would include, quote unquote, coordination of other engineering and architectural services, and that is stated as the primary function on both projects. So this person was not just, this is, in my opinion, not just a seal issue, but an ongoing practice issue if we consider the fact that coordination of other disciplines providing engineering and architecture services is indeed either engineering or architecture by definition, as we've been discussing. So I just want to point that out because those are the kind of things that will be coming before us later as we get deeper into the definition side of things. Do we have a recommendation at this point?
My original recommendation was to authorize a civil penalty in the amount of $500 for practicing on an expired license. The respondent is also to take the laws and rules exam, and I'm requesting authorization for a formal hearing if civil penalty and exam requirements are not met.
I'm going to continue to hold the floor for a second and just ask a few more questions. So was this one reviewed by anybody on the board?
This was presented, I believe, before it came to us before I was involved with the board. I don't have it here that it was sent to a reviewer.
Well, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I would like to go with the motion of defer, have the case reviewed by a member of the board, and represent next time, because to me the facts as presented are too shallow for me to make a good decision.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That was number 11.
Item is number 11, complaint number 201903851. This involves a professional architect. As the board will recall, this was also deferred from the August 2019 meeting. The complaint was opened after it was discovered the respondent was practicing on an expired license. The respondent was embarrassed by the situation and didn't realize the license had been expired, and the respondent has submitted a request for reinstatement. Aggravating factor was the respondent did not self-report. The new information is the respondent's license expired on December 28th, 2018, and was renewed on May 6th, 2019. And during the unlicensed period, the respondent engaged in 14 residential projects in the Memphis and Germantown, Tennessee area during the period of licensure. The list of projects was not provided, just the statement by the respondent.
Frank?
I think it would be good to know what the list of projects is, and the reason I say that could be 14 single-family 1,000-square-foot houses, or it could be 14 40-story high-rise residential. I'm being facetious, but you know what I'm saying, is that residential means a lot of things, and it could involve a lot of people.
Ricky?
I mean, it's possible, I guess, the 14 residential homes did not require a licensed architect, correct? So if that were the case, that wouldn't be really a rules infraction, if that were the case. But like you said,
It was 14 apartment,
right.
14 buildings in an apartment complex. It would require, you know.
Board members, I stand corrected. There was a list of projects provided, and they're all residential.
As in houses?
Yes, sir.
What's the square footage?
We don't have those details.
Are they? Do they seem like they're new build houses, or does it seem like they? I don't know. Does it give any kind of?
It appears they were all new build, and some renovations and builder work. Yes, some of them were.
For my clarification, if I'm licensed as an architect, no matter what size of project I'm working on, whether a stamp is required necessarily, am I not supposed to stamp those drawings? In this case, let's say it's a 4,800 square foot house, and we have that 5,000 square foot rule. No?
Is there a definition in the rules? I again apologize for not having my.
We actually got a response from our legal staff on that, and the answer was that if it is not a requirement in the law to be stamped, even though you are a registrant, you do not have to stamp them. Is that correct? That was issued not too long ago.
And regardless of the square footage.
Regardless of if it's not required, even if you're a registrant, you don't have to seal it.
Looking at what needs to be stamped and what doesn't, just to answer you, it says that a registered architect or engineer is required for other than the following: less than 3 stories, A; B, less than 5,000 square feet, and those are A and B under structures classified as business, factory, industrial, residential. But then number 2 is 1 family and 2 family dwellings and domestic outbuildings pertinent to those dwellings. So it doesn't really have a square footage associated with that. I mean, it makes it look like 1 family or an architect.
Brian?
I hate to ask to read 14 projects, but is there any way that we can get more description from? Do you have maybe a look? Because we might could rule on it if we knew what they, a little bit more there are. I know 14's a lot, but if it's
Sure. The Custom Homes Clothier Residence, Germantown, Tennessee. Nunn Residence, Memphis, Tennessee. Schaefer Residence, Memphis, Tennessee. Tayloe Residence, Memphis, Tennessee. Wright Residence, Jackson, Tennessee. Renovations. Belling Residence, Memphis, Tennessee. Herber's Residence, Memphis, Tennessee. Riley Residence, Memphis, Tennessee. I believe it's Safiel Residence, Memphis, Tennessee. Tayloe Residence, Memphis, Tennessee. The Speculative Builder Market, Elkington Poplar, Williamsburg, Memphis, Tennessee. Elkington Hain, Memphis, Tennessee. Hedge Path, Grandview, Memphis, Tennessee. Longtown Chapel Cove, Germantown, Tennessee.
Yeah, I'm sorry I made you do that because I guess they still don't have quite enough information about it. But thanks for doing it still. But I guess we really need to just know exactly what, because they could have all been 6,000 square foot houses for all we know. So maybe if we can just find out that little bit of information, a little bit more information on it.
Being from that area, I can. Those are all residential areas, but we don't know the square footage and how large they were. So, yes.
Again, the definition doesn't tell us the square footage.
It does
Up
to 5,000.
No, that's for commercial projects. Residential projects does not have a square footage requirement. Am I correct?
The way, yeah, I mean, it looks like, and this may need legal too, but it looks to me like doesn't require, there's a number 1, and it says structures identified, and it lists the different building categories, and residential is included, and that's got the less than 3 stories in height and less than 5,000 square feet. Number 2 category that doesn't require an architect says 1 family and 2 family dwellings and domestic outbuildings are pertinent to those dwellings. And then it's got a number 3 farm building. So the way I interpret that is the 1 family and 2 family residential dwellings don't have a size or story, but other residential buildings like apartment buildings or 3 family, that multifamily does have the square footage and story. So if it's single or 2 family, to me, it looks like it doesn't have a square footage component.
Yeah. May I continue?
Yes, please.
So the architect let his license lapse. That's a totally different subject here, I think. My opinion is that he does not have to seal these houses. Just because he's not licensed at the time does not create that problem in my mind, because there's an exemption to that. Now, he renewed his license. For whatever reason, he didn't renew it.
Renewed late.
He renewed late. Okay, so he renewed late. But he didn't stamp any drawings while he was doing the single family, I'm assuming, single family homes in those neighborhoods that you're familiar with. It doesn't appear to be, Frank may have additional.
Well, that was a question.
Yeah, but it doesn't appear to me, I don't know where that would state in there that it might have been multifamily or commercial. So, I bringing that point up, that exemption is what I'm thinking about, but I yield the floor.
I guess the question I was going to raise is, did he seal the drawings?
No, and based on the list that was provided, these were single-family dwellings, residences.
I realize that there's not a requirement that he seal them, but my question was, did he seal them?
Given it's residential, then these properties were exempt.
If they were single-family.
Kathy?
Yeah, so, Shalina, did you know that they were single-family residential?
I'm just referring to the list where he lists the residents of the individual family.
And he says in there they're SFR, or are you implying that based on our conversation?
I'm basing it on, they're all residential in the statement given to us, and the listing lists each family name.
Each family name? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I guess this is one of those, if one of us reviewed it, I don't know.
I think Frank's question is most pertinent here. Did he seal those drawings?
No.
Okay. Can I make a motion?
You may make a motion.
I
yes.
make a motion we dismiss this case. I will also leave this motion open if there is any type of letter that we may need to issue or anything to that case, but my motion is to dismiss.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, Steve?
I think in the past, we've still issued a $500 penalty, even if the registrant hadn't done any engineering architectural work, just because they let their license lapse.
Because they were practicing.
Yes, the violation is for unlicensed practice in this complaint.
I just think that's what we've done multiple times.
I think you're right.
I think if we have evidence that this person was continuing to practice on projects that required a registrant, I agree. But if the only practice didn't require registration, I don't think I can agree with that.
I think I will agree, and the reason being is if he was not intending to use his license, he could have put it in a retirement status or some inactive status. So it was obvious he was at some point intending to use his license for something, and failure to renew that is failure to renew. I mean, it's not, again, he could have put it in inactive status if he didn't plan on using it for that period of time or whatever he wanted to do, but it's a failure to renew. And I understand. But I guarantee you, he still signed. He still had architect on his, and held himself out to that when he presented to these people that he was going to do the renovations or new homes or whatever he was going to do. He still presented himself as an architect, and not being licensed is part of that whole thing. So, I would make a motion or a friendly amendment, or I'm not sure exactly where the motion is, Mr. Chair, that we do assess a $500 penalty in view of what Steve said, which he's absolutely right, that it was an unlicensed failure to renew your license in a timely manner. But I understand what you're saying.
We have a motion on the floor, I believe. Rick? Who made the motion? Rick made the motion. We have a second.
Do we need to make an amendment now or listen to Kathy?
Kathy? Sorry.
So I failed to renew a license in North Carolina at the end of last calendar year, and I recently renewed in June before they wouldn't allow me to just pay a late fee. I didn't do anything in North Carolina. Not a thing. We don't have an office. We don't have a website. We don't practice. We don't have any employees. We don't do anything. I don't think that I didn't intend to let it go into retirement or inactive. So I don't consider that I was practicing on an expired license. And I really encourage us not to get into the practice of judging people on what we assume to be their intent. So I think we need to look really closely at the facts. And if we feel like the facts haven't been presented, even though this is a representment, maybe we have to go with a representment and get it right. But I just want to say, I think we need to make sure we get the facts straight and not jump to conclusions about whether or not they offered to practiced, or violated an actual rule. Let's make sure we know what we're doing. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. We have a Rick?
I do have a comment to make, and thank you, Kathy, for bringing that up. I recently had a client ask me to do a project in another state. I told them that I was not licensed in that state, but I would love to do that project. I got my license renewed, and then I started on that project. So I was not practicing in that state. I did not represent myself as a practicing architect in that state, only that I had been previously registered, and I let my license expire because I didn't have any work there. I knew it was expiring. So regardless of whether you forgot or you didn't forget, it's an expired license. However, and in this particular instance, Campbell, I would not amend my recommendation or motion because of that. Because whether the guy I don't know what his intentions were. Yeah, so I'm not sure that if I presented that correctly in terms of the amendment or friendly amendment to the motion.
So you don't accept the friendly amendment. The motion stands as it was. Wanda, do you remember that? Do you have that motion?
Just wrote the word dismiss.
Okay. Okay. Simply dismiss, and we have a second on that. So let's, any further discussion? Let's take a vote on that motion. All in favor?
Are we going to do a roll call vote, or are we all?
That's probably a good idea. Roll call vote on the motion on the floor, which is to dismiss this case.
No.
Robert Campbell.
No.
Ricky Versailles.
Yes.
Mayor Parker.
Yes.
Brian Tibbs.
Yes.
Rick Thomas.
Yes.
Frank Wagster.
Yes.
Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Thank you. That was item 12.
Can we take a bathroom break?
Yes.
Thank you.
Let's.
That
let's
was
take
item 11.
Second.
11.
We have one case left. We want to take a break.
Take a
Okay.
quick break,
We'll
please.
take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
From the looks of it, yeah.
It's a long one. Were we taking like an hour break or?
Probably do. Okay, let's bring the
Thank you.
meeting.
We're back on the record.
Great, thank you. Shalina?
Yes, number 12. The complaint number is 2019021691. This is a represent. As you will recall, at the August 2019 meeting, the board deferred this. The board made a decision on this matter. This involved a self-reporting by a professional engineer of an expired license. The respondents did submit a list of 21 projects that were worked on while the license was expired. The mitigating factor was that the respondent had self-reported. My recommendation was to authorize a civil penalty in the amount of $500 for practicing on an expired license, and the respondent was to take and pass the laws and rules examination. And I requested authorization of a formal hearing if the civil penalty and exam requirements were not met. Upon further discussion, the board determined that the aggravating factor was the 21 projects that were completed during the license, during the period the license had been expired, and assessed a civil penalty of $500 per incident for practicing on an expired license for a total of $10,500, and also required taking and passing the laws and rules examination. Upon conclusion of that board meeting, I've received a extensive letter from the respondent with attachments. The respondent submitted a 2-page letter and 56 pages of photographs and medical bills during the period that the information had explanation concerning the period the respondent had been unlicensed and the respondent's situation, and discussed the high civil penalty. The respondent stated in the letter that the non-renewal was not timely and accidental. The respondent's license expired at the end of June 2018 and was renewed in March 2019. The respondent took full responsibility and stated that it may have been also because the respondent had changed respondent's email address in November 2017 and did not receive the email renewal notification. The respondent discovered the license was lapsed on February 27, 2019 and immediately self-reported. This was 2 months after the 6-month grace period. The respondent stated the civil penalty levied is quite excessive and would like consideration because of self-reporting. The bulk of the projects were certified were small private projects, and the respondent did provide a complete list of all those projects. During the meeting, the respondent said that that it was referenced that the unlicensed period was 2 years, and that was incorrect. It was only a 9-month period. The respondent goes on to further explain that the respondent has 2 children with autonomic nervous system disorder called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS. The family has been dealing with the disorder for the last 3 years and gone to see specialists at Vanderbilt, Children's Hospital in Knoxville, Duke Medical Center, and their treating cardiologist in Washington, D.C. One of the daughters, who is 16 years old, has a central intravenous line and takes 2 liters of saline daily to maintain her life. Both of the respondents' children take at least 20 prescription medications daily to maintain their various autonomic systems. On December 31st, 2018, the last day of the 6-month grace period, the respondent was at the first day of an 8-day stay at Children's Hospital. The family has incurred hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical expenses, even after payment by the insurance company. The respondent has provided the board with copies of some of the expenses for the prescription costs and the medical insurance and the payments. Some are paid, some of those medical bills are paid, and some still need to be paid. The respondent wholeheartedly acknowledges that it was the respondent's own fault for not renewing the license timely, but it was completely unintentional, and the respondent did self-report. In light of the above, the respondent respectfully requests that the board reconsider the $10,500 civil penalty assessed at the board's prior board meeting based on all of these extenuating circumstances.
So, Shalina, this was reviewed at our last meeting where we instituted a $10,500 fine, and now it comes back to us because of extenuating circumstances.
Yes, okay. This is new information.
Chairman, I would respectfully like to recuse myself. I know the respondent here. He actually called me sometime after our board meeting and asked me what the options were that he had, and I said, well, you either pay the penalty or you certainly have the right to appeal the decision. But I said those basically are your 2 options. But since I know who it is, it's somebody that I interact with from time to time. I just don't think it's a good thing for me to weigh in on.
Ms. Ballard.
A couple of years ago, we went through the process of creating a little bit of grace where people have situations that, they're taking care of family members, they've had personal health issues, they have military issues, and I think this particular case falls under that category where we need to think about, the big picture on this one. And so my recommendation would be that we reduce the initial penalty because we have all the information now. So,
Frank?
I'm going to move that we waive the civil penalty and ask him to take and pass the laws and rules extenuating circumstances.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Vote all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Board members, that concludes the legal report for today's board meeting.
One general comment, just in reviewing applications and also in our legal case report, I'm thinking that we are seeing more cases where people are practicing on an expired license and they didn't know that it was expired than I think in the last 2 or 3 years than I remember in the first several years I was on the board. And I might be totally incorrect in that memory, but it seems like we've had more in the last 2 years than in all my previous years. And I think in our October meeting that we should have it as an agenda item to talk about what we're doing. Or is there anything we can do to prevent or help prevent some of these people who are not aware their license has expired, and there may be absolutely nothing, or maybe we may decide we're all professionals and we should keep up with it. But I know that if you're registered in different states, you see how different states handle it, and it may at least be worth looking at how the other states handle these things. So I just mention that for the consideration of the board, or whether they think that would be worthwhile, because these are a lot of cases.
Yes. Rick.
Good point, Ricky. I'm licensed personally in 22 states, and I have a spreadsheet, and every state is different. You know, some are alternating years, some are 2 years, some are 1 year. The continuing education credits are different. Some, actually, one state requires 0. But I keep up with that because that's my responsibility to keep up with my licensure. That's why I have a spreadsheet, and that's why I check it right on a regular basis. So I don't know what we do. I'm just making a statement. I'm not. I think it's a good idea that we try to figure something out. But I get email notices. I still get hard copy notices. I get it's all over the board. But you know, I just in this instance it's different, and I understand. But as a general rule, this is the first one I remember that's been this big of a hardship, and I'm 100% behind this particular ruling. But I don't think it's okay for me to say, oh, I forgot. 9 months, 12 months, you know, whatever it is. So I don't know how we deal with this other than we give them a notice that's prescribed in we have been doing the whole time I remember the paper notices, and then so you know, I don't know how you handle that, and if we can be thinking about that and come up with a better solution that's in place now, that's fine. But you know, I'm just I don't get it. So thank you.
Could I add just real quick that way for your questions, if maybe the piece of what we do for the renewal you all have, it hasn't changed. Some programs have the option to change in our statute. We have to give notice of renewal. So the process is still a paper. It is not an email. We do not email the renewal notices. We have the option to do that as well. It's something we could think about. But we send them in the mail to the address that we have on file, and they go out about 60 days before your expiration date. So that hasn't changed. Of course, the state postal cost is a little bit cheaper, and so it doesn't forward. If you have moved, and some people think that the forwarding address will get it, it won't get it to you. They'll come back in the mail. But it is your obligation, as in almost all programs, to notify that you've moved. So the email reminder could be there. We don't do anything other than the mail. And the postal system has changed, probably more so in the last 2 to 3 years. In West Tennessee, I think one of their main hubs closed completely. We felt it in almost all of our programs, more things coming back in the mail, taking a lot longer to get there. So that may be contributing to what you're seeing, and people move around more. But I did want you to know what we do in the office hasn't changed. So, thank you.
I was just going to say I agree with Rick, because I don't have 22, but I have 8 that I have to keep up with as well. And the emails are good, the mail is good. But if you think about your driver's license, you don't have to. No one calls and tells you your driver's license expired. You know, you just you know when it expires. So I kind of agree. As a professional, we do have to have a little bit of responsibility ourselves to take it up. So anyway, I think that if you can do an email, that's awesome, you know, as long as it's not a whole lot extra cost. I think it'd be great. But, you know, I think there has to be some responsibility back on the professional.
And I agree with that. I licensed, I believe, in 6 or 7 states, and I allowed my Kentucky license to lapse. And unlike Tennessee, they do not have a grace period. So once it's expired, you have to go back through the entire process. So that's another reminder to me that I better really keep up with it. And I too have a spreadsheet, and I've shared that spreadsheet with people, and think I'm pretty good at it. And somehow that one got through. So things do happen. So I agree. Thank you.
There. Sorry. I'm going to get on my newsletter soapbox and say that I think that if we had an ongoing regular outreach to registrants, that we would have, I realize that goes email also, that we're not going to hard copy a bunch of newsletters, 21,000 newsletters out to people. The expense would be ridiculous. But if we got into the habit of routinely communicating with registrants and providing them links to an available newsletter, and in every newsletter we reinforce the constant fact that registrants were getting fined and being found in violation of practicing without a license because they allowed it to expire. It would be educational. It would also remind them to double check their, and I totally agree. We're all adults. Everybody has to keep up with that. But the truth of the matter is, for those who have multiple, as most of us do, licenses around the country, the constant reminder sure would be nice. And I'm just going to beat that horse. I know he's dead, but, I really think we need a newsletter.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, let's move into the grant letters and timeline.
Thank you. I think right before that we have an update on the rules on the agenda, and I don't think there's a major change, but I did email them to everyone, and I'll turn it over to Stuart in case you have any questions. This is just to see which ones are in the pipeline.
There was a change to one of the rules, 0120-01-.031F, and was adding any person gaining practical experience in an office of a practicing architect may use the title, appellation, or designation architectural associate. This rule has been sent to the Publications Division of Secretary of State and becomes effective October 30th, 2019. That's the only rule update I have.
Okay. Any discussion?
I do have one question. I wonder if you've seen where they're using it now. Is that okay?
It was something that it's been wrestled with, I guess, is probably the best way, with AIA and NCARB, and so it's what we've all kind of agreed to.
But it's not legal. It's not legal yet. Is that my understanding? I'm not going to turn anybody in. I just wanted. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Quick question, too, on the rules. Did the one we did where we could get experience by working for a certain period of time, is it still out there, or did it go through? Remember the one? I think it's in there. I missed that one. Yeah, where we didn't have a co-op. Yeah. Did it get passed? Was it in here and I just missed it? We had a rule about that at our last board retreat. You remember the gentleman that appeared? I think it was our last board retreat. And I just had the clock in my head on how long these things take and what we were going to do. We were going to put that in a rule that about some experience. We could give them work experience for so many years working up to a point. And I thought that was in a rule, but it seems to me that rule's probably, again, just kind of going in my clock in my head, has not had time to get through the process. We had that somewhere, and I've got an application, I think, that's got that on there. So that's one of the reasons.
I can check to see, well, it's just not hitting my memory bank right now, but I can check real quick to see if that was a rule that we recently passed and get back to you. I can do that while we're sitting here.
I've had a couple applications that had that could be a germane issue as far as experience, and for some reason, I just didn't think it was. I knew that was our intent to do that, and I think we put it in a rule making somewhere. But it just doesn't seem like, those things usually take about 9 months, and it seems like it would be still out there somewhere because we probably wouldn't have filed it until December, January. That after the first of the year time frame, so it probably isn't quite time, but.
That was over 2 years ago.
Was it 2? Okay, well maybe that's where my my screw up
is.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, that may be where
Harold Cannon came.
Yeah, that may be where my memory's back. Okay, so it should be through then.
I'll look while I'm sitting over here.
I'll look through here. I just for some reason had that one in a vacuum. Sorry about this. I had that one in a vacuum.
Ricky?
Yeah, it's in here. I mean, these are the rules we.
And I just missed it.
1 year credit for 3 years or more qualified experience prior to graduation. That's the one. Yeah, it's in here.
I overlooked it. My fault then. Thank you.
It was probably attached to that rule that went through with the fee reduction or elimination for the engineer intern, because some things moved with that one. Yeah. Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, director's report.
And right before that, I'm sorry to stop you. And Tony, before you leave, the board had asked Tony Glandorf to do a little bit of research on QBS violations. That document is on page 52 before you. In case you do have questions, Tony will very likely not be here in October, so I wanted that to be looked at. This was a work product in question that we had for him. So on your iPads, it's on page 52. Emailed last week when I sent everything, so if you do have anything else that you need or other questions, I just wanted to take advantage of Tony being here. Okay.
Have any questions? Any comments? Kathy?
I think I asked this question, so it strikes me as just a little bit of an awkward answer. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. If they bid or provide pricing, the answer is no. And unless I'm just not smart enough to understand the answer. Sorry.
So, Tony, with that, maybe several of us are confused as well. Is this something you could review with us quickly?
Yeah, I can. I just need to kind of point where the confusion's where the confusion's at.
The way I interpret it, I mean, it may be that the answer no is confusing, but because we would expect a yes, but the way when I read the whole thing, the way I interpreted it is that the answer was no, because a registrant is always going to get into providing a client with, or whatever it says, state agency with a price eventually, if they're selected. So it definitely is part of the process. But what the answer goes on to explain is, but if that's part of an RFQ or an RFP that should have been an RFQ, you can't give a price. But the registrant can give a price in other circumstances where they're negotiating their fee, and that's part of the QBS.
Yeah, that is part. I mean, that is part of it. Is that process is also part of it. I think, and I apologize if there's a confusion on the way that we wrote it, because I think I could have probably wrote that a couple different ways. Now that I think about it, it makes sense to me when I was writing it, but I think I was just trying to follow my own structure of how I do things, because I could have easily said, well, everything that we do through municipalities in the state is governed by QPS. However, there's exceptions. There's exceptions. So I think that notes that there are some exceptions out there, that there are some items that there's an exception. So it's no unless it's required to have gone through the request for qualifications process. Does that make more sense? Is that I'm trying to take into consideration exceptions.
So if a registrant puts in pricing information under an RFQ, a municipality has said, here's an RFQ, and we want pricing information, and even though the registrant knows that's incorrect to give pricing, and they go ahead and give that information, then they would be in violation of what we have if they did it on the front end as part of the RFQ.
Yes.
But on the back end, or if it's a service that's not required to go through the RFQ process, then they certainly can give pricing information however they want to, as long as it's not contingent on the RFQ process.
Yes.
Okay.
And we also run into the inverse, which is you have a municipality who does a RFP, and it should have been an RFQ, and they submitted information, and at the time they should have done it, then that could be a violation of the rule if it was found that it was required to be an RFQ, not an RFP. Does that make sense?
There was one instance that I remember in our FAQs that we don't have anymore. And I think I know the answer, but one of the questions written in by someone was, if you get a RFP or Q and they require you to provide pricing, but it's in a separate envelope that they're not going to open until they select someone, is that violating?
I don't know. If we've answered that before and it's an FAQ, I don't have that in front of me. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I think at the time it was like, yes, that's not allowed. But it's kind of a gray area to me still. Every time we do something like this, there's all kinds of crafty ways to try to get around it.
Right, and it's not this law, in the QBS law is it's not a substantial law that was written. It's not regulated by, one office that has added to it or looked at it or whatnot. So yes, I mean, we've run into that several times because, like you said, there's all these crafty ways of trying to figure out where are the lines.
Right.
Right. The left and right limits. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of the phone call I get that I don't know how to answer.
I'm kind of the same way.
Okay.
Robert?
Okay, this is the same memory that couldn't remember if it was a year or two ago, so keep that with a grain of salt. But I seem to remember that we asked at the time the Attorney General, not for an opinion, but just for not an official opinion, but just they ran it through some of the Attorney General's office. And the answer we got back was, yes, we would consider that to submit pricing information. Now, that's not an official opinion. It was, we're going to ask a few people and see what they would look at. Again, not an official opinion, but that's again, you're talking about the same memory that couldn't remember a minute ago. But because we had that in the FAQs that said you couldn't submit one, and I thought that was the rationale behind it, was because they just said hypothetically to the Attorney General's office, if we did this, what would you think? And some of the attorneys in the AG's office said, yeah, that probably would make sense.
Right. And I think what you end up in those scenarios, and I can't remember what their answer would have been one way or the other, is that's the opinion of one attorney that hasn't been vetted through their supervisor. Yeah.
And it may be, the way it was presented was two or three of them they kind of
right.
had. But again, I totally
And we've
agree.
done that before in the past, just to try to, usually we do it once in a while just to try to see, right. get another attorney's feel for it as to what their reading of the law is.
I think that's why we put the answer in the FAQ, because they said, well, let me run this with a couple people and just see what they say. And that was, anyway.
For what it's worth, I think if you read about QBS nationally, some like an ACEC or an AIA, what they say about it. I know it doesn't matter here because we're talking about Tennessee state law, but I think they frown upon the closed envelope thing, that is getting around and can affect the process. That's not part of the process of coming to an agreement, negotiating, and then moving on. Anyway, for what that's worth.
Well, if they call me, I'm going to say, well, Rick Bursa said.
Tell them I said so.
Any further discussion? Okay. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Roxana?
Now we are on page, I
Okay.
think it's 55. Thank you. This is our financial piece on your iPads, page 55. And before I get too far into it, I do want to, I think after the board meeting, the first thing I did is email everyone saying that I should have connected the pieces regarding the question on the $322 plus $330,000 expenses during the month of March. And of course, that's the distribution of our grant money for the 2019 period. And so hopefully that makes sense and why it didn't stand out. I think it's because I didn't see $350,000 all at once. So that was just a question that was left pending from last meeting. So back to our financial. This is through June 2019. We are currently at $2,128,358 that will be in the reserves, and we've been pretty consistent with that number as far as what we're bringing in has almost completely gone out, so it's been good. We will have some changes to the June because fiscal year 2019 will be closing, so by the October meeting we should have a final of everything that needed to be cost back and charge back and so forth should be in there, but unless you've got any questions, I think we're pretty close to bringing in a little bit more than what we're spending, but our consistent number at the bottom, which is that reserve, covers us for about a year and a half, which is what our legislators like, not to see a huge surplus in there, but at least enough to where we know we're comfortable with where we're at. So by October, we should have final numbers and then be able to talk about this. If the board thinks that we still have too much and want to look at fees in any way and reducing anything, that may be a good point because we have seen some reduction in our expenses. Any questions? As far as complaint data on page 57, this is the open complaints, all the open complaints, which include the ones that you heard today that will, several of them will be deferred until October, just listing the profession, the aging that you have. And you do not have at this meeting the complaints that we open administratively for the letter of instruction to be sent, and I apologize. By putting these together, I realized that the team was behind in opening those. So in October, we will present a lot of administrative complaints open between May and July that just got open last week or this week.
Roxana, going back to page 55, I'm curious of the line field enforcement. What is field enforcement? The second from the bottom in the spreadsheet.
One that's zero?
Yes.
For our program?
Yes.
So it'd be our field inspectors. Many programs, like the cosmetology barber, scrap metal, motor vehicles, contracting, we have field inspectors that go out all the time to inspect locations as part of statute for the most part. But in some cases, even reviewers, appraisers pay for reviewers, experts in the industry that actually bid for a contract and they get paid. That way you don't have the board members always looking at those. They're officially individuals looking for violations to use PAP and so forth, depending. So that's where that would be expensed.
So when we have somebody investigating something for illegal, that goes in this?
It would. If we actually had to
line.
send an investigator to do something, absolutely. That's where it would be charged, yes. Great question.
Discussion?
Okay.
Let's move on.
We're moving on to a piece we've had lingering here. I emailed this to everyone as well. I have a paper copy so I can make notes. On your iPads, we are on page 58, and this is our grant letter to hopefully be tweaked. I have not gotten any updates to this, additional questions to this. I think what was emailed was the letter that I also had sent last meeting. It's a front and back 2-page letter with the recommended change from legal within contracting. So any changes that you have, the rule that is that statutory state rule that kind of trumps ours is included, and Stuart will be happy to answer anything we've got. So I open this wide open. Open it.
Sent to us?
Yes. You had the grant
Somehow.
information with
sorry.
with your other items for the meeting, but also prior to that.
Right.
I had intended to send it right after our last board meeting, but in my blind copying group, I actually didn't include the full board, so then I sent it, I think, 2 weeks or so after the meeting, and then again last week with all your documents. So hopefully you've all got the letter and the statute that goes behind why we're reviewing this.
Susan?
I've been doing a lot of traveling, so that's why I didn't get to it as soon as I'd hoped to. I think it's fine. I just think that we need to give them 30 days from the day that we send out the letter, simply because if it takes a week to get through the mail process.
I will be emailing these.
Okay.
I will also be happy to put them in the mail, but my method of communication because of
email?
this is actually going to be email.
Okay.
I'll probably include, if I have 2 or 3 people in a particular university, all 3.
Yep.
And my email, my thought, and you all please correct me if I'm wrong, is to make the email statement short and simple, and Stuart will prove it, simply saying, we understand there's a delay for this, and the reason is something else was brought to our attention. Please review the letter carefully. The added piece includes possibly programs, something that points them straight to it, so that they can communicate back and forth with me. And I've already probably emailed with 3 or 4 universities, those that have sent me the receipts. You know, the receipts for the 2018 funds are due by August 31st, the last day in August. So 3 or 4 have sent me those receipts. I've taken advantage of saying, and I know you're probably wondering about the next one. It'll come to you. I'll email it to you. But then 2 other universities thought they were left off. And so I did bring them in the loop and say, you aren't. At the next meeting, we should finalize the letter. And so I agree with you. I'm going to email them. And from that date, if you're okay with the 30 days, that'll put us on track.
So I had a couple of those emails as well, and I was just explaining to them there's been a change in that we just need to get the verbiage down correctly. I don't know if you're able to highlight and send it out as highlighted, but I think there's probably a couple key points, because depending on who gets it, they may think, oh, this is the same letter. And if we can emphasize the fact of the change in terms of financing operations or program activities.
What portion of the letter are you on?
I think it's the second paragraph.
Yes.
Therefore, the board will consider the ratio between the amount of funds requested for equipment and the amount of funds requested for financing operations or program activities when determining how to distribute the grant funds. So anyway, just so they understand, they may need to write this request differently, and maybe we need to give them the opportunity to ask us questions. So, since it is a new format, that's just a thought. So,
Ricky?
I don't have any suggested changes to the letter, but the thought that occurred to me was the emphasis is on financing operations or program activities versus just paying for equipment. I just wondered how we would view if they wanted to purchase a piece of equipment that allows them programming activity, like a new programming activity, like some kind of laser cutter that they don't have now that allows a whole new lab. Does that kick into the supporting program activities versus just equipment costs? Would we look at it that way? Okay.
And
I'm sorry.
I've asked that question. What is programming if it's not just limited to exam fees? And the explanation fits exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
The proposal would need to be written in a way that explains that yes, we're buying this equipment for this program. That's its purpose.
And the number of students that are going to benefit from it, whether it's freshman through senior or just senior, they just need to write it so that it's something that a majority of the students are going to be able to benefit from. as opposed to one class if you take that class in your major, so.
Frank?
If I was receiving this letter, I would be asking, if I was receiving this letter, I'd probably be asking the question, how do I determine what a reasonable ratio is of equipment to program? Because that is one of the last sentences of the second paragraph. And what would be the answer? I mean, I can see, some kind of equipment creating a program, but how much of that is the operational part of it may be very small in comparison. I can see another, university putting all the money into paying fees and buying a pencil sharpener. I'm only bringing this up because it says we're going to consider the ratios, and by what, measure do we consider that? I mean, I think having the ability to just, we can look at it and decide, but calling it a ratio is kind of a strange. If I was getting the letter, I'd be going, well, they've got a number, maybe 50-50, it may be 30, 70, but we don't have a ratio to give them, so they're just kind of, it's a shot in the dark.
So primarily to make a decision, it's difficult. I mean, on what basis are we making that decision? Based on the ratio.
Right.
Susan?
So the supporting documentation that Roxanne has provided really emphasizes paying fees for the students to take the examinations, but some of the programs don't require that. And so that's where, we needed to make sure that they were clear they could buy equipment if it supported a program that the majority of the students would be able to attend. It doesn't mean they can't use it for fees, for the examinations if they want to. They're just, it shouldn't be, that's the only thing you can do with the money, because some schools don't require that for graduation, and some do. And we can't dictate that within the colleges. So I agree with what you're saying, Frank. This is our first time to do this, and I don't know that we've got enough information to set, a ratio, unless somebody else has a thought.
We just want to meet the state law.
Yeah.
Do it right.
I think going back to what Frank said about maybe this equipment is necessary to begin a new program, and I think maybe the percentage, there's an explanation as to why the percentage might be higher. For example, it's common sense. I can't continue to increase my enrollment in civil engineering unless I have this, and this could potentially impact 100 students. I don't know that we want to put a percentage on there. I think that's up to them and up to us to decide this is appropriate or this is not. It's my opinion.
Further discussion? One, I guess, question I have is with regard to that, Rick, and I'm going to look at Shalina on this. How does that work in the legal side of it? If you understand the question?
No, I'm sorry. Could you please repeat it?
Well, if we're saying that a proportion, what, how much of this is related to equipment and programming, for example, what are those numbers? And that's what we're saying. What are those numbers? So how does that work with the overall legal side of this that we're trying to meet? The state designation.
Fortunately, I mean, I don't have the information to answer that question.
The only thing I can add is I asked that question before last month's meeting or June's meeting, and the answer was that it isn't set. It is really a ratio that they can decide. So back to Susan's point, if Susan or the board now decides the ratio should be 60-40, 50-50, whatever you decide, we could put that, but it's specifically not set because it could depend on the program. It does leave it wide open.
Because like Frank had mentioned last time, intern development is after graduation, so that really needs to be removed from the letter. And, but.
Where are you on intern development?
Okay, second paragraph, where it says proposal submitted with the
Pay
grant.
intern development,
Yeah.
scratch it,
Scratch it, because that's after graduation.
and
Or
just
our-
examinations, okay.
Right. So, they're going to ask us what the ratio is, you know.
At their discretion, and then when you review, the grant committee reviews the proposals, if that ratio doesn't sound right and you don't want to approve it or go back and forth, that would be the time.
we need-
Unless this board decides today that the ratio is 50-50, whatever you decide.
So it's in essence up to the committee, the grants
Right.
committee, to make this decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
As you review what you're getting, yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Any other comments? Thank you. Yes, Rick.
I'm just trying to reacquaint myself with the intern development
Yeah.
part right here.
Intern development. Curriculum to having intern development.
Intern development, we have interns every year. So, I mean, what is the process of the universities encouraging intern development? Because is that just totally up to the individual, or is there's no funding provided for that at all? None? Okay.
Students are required to find their own internship, and they pay the tuition.
Asking
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah, that's okay.
But if
Robert?
if this states it in the state law that it could be used, couldn't a university use the grant money toward that?
I suppose, but I mean, again, from what I know, and I don't know every university, but the ones that I know, I mean, it's, you know, career development people, career centers will help students kind of go through that process if they want one. But I don't think it's a requirement for graduation. It's not a requirement for, you know, like you don't get class credit for it anywhere. It's just that looks good on their resume, or it gives them a little bit of spending money in the summer, or it helps them in a real world experience. But it's not something, I don't think it's in a curriculum anywhere. The ones that we've hired probably a couple every year or something, and it's just them reaching out to us and saying, hey, I'd like to do a little something this summer. I'm going to be in town, or whatever the situation may be. So I don't know that universities have any kind of formal. Now, again, through the Career Center, they may help, but I don't think it's here's something prescriptive that we're going to make you do an internship of some sort. The ones that I've been familiar with.
Okay.
Further discussion? All right, Roxana, I think we're done with the director's report.
Perfect. I've got one portion of this letter coming out, highlighting the others. The letter will give at least, so if I can get it out Friday or Monday, 30 days via email, and I'll just keep following up until we can hopefully get all of these back and start getting them to the grant committee. So I appreciate that immensely.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Could I go back to the complaint data
Yes.
before we get out of the director's report?
Yes, sir.
Page 57, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Those are cases that we are going to be hearing.
Those are open. This is all of our open cases. So every one of these has come before you, because today we had 11 or so, or 12 on.
So all these have been completed.
Yes,
Okay.
they're in the pipeline.
All right, in the pipeline.
Not completed.
Not
They're
completed.
open. They're open, but they've been reviewed by the board already. 'Cause
Okay. Well, that's my point. We've had a few today that have not been reviewed by board members, and I'm not real comfortable making a decision on something that has not been reviewed by a board member if we are inclined to vote on it.
No, this you're not. The report before you
Yeah,
is
no, but
simply
this
your information.
opened up that
Right.
subject again in my mind.
Okay.
No offense to anyone in staff who's reviewing these, but I think that I think what we have 2 or 3 today that we hadn't, or someone hadn't seen, that I think we need to be in that loop, which we always have been, but we need to make sure that case may be assigned to the appropriate professional moving forward. So I don't know. That's my opinion.
And Shalina and I discussed that, and again, as we sometimes change litigating attorneys, will, on the self-report, I don't think the every one of those had been sent. I think those are the ones that hadn't maybe been sent, and a few others. So they'll be going to a member. But those 11 are in this group that you're seeing here. Yes, absolutely. No, I got that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Roxanna. Anything else?
That is all that I have. Thank you.
All right, let's move to the committee reports. Engineering Committee.
So I was the appointed chairman yesterday because our fearless leader and the one that we draw most of our inspiration from in the engineering profession, Alton Heathcote, was not there. And so I was tasked with almost an impossible task, which was to fill his shoes. So I'm going to attempt to give an engineering committee report that is less than 15 pages and not with all the detail that you would normally be hearing from him. So the first item we discussed several applications and adjudicated those based on what our discussions were. We had, I think, 3, and 1 I think will come back to us as we look for some clarification. We had Mr. Philip Cameron discuss fire alarms with us. There's some gray area when it comes to renovations, what's maintenance, what's not maintenance. What changes require PE in the fire alarm. Again, remember we have the fire sprinkler matrix that they've used, and everybody's very happy with that. We're going to try to convene a group. I believe John Kinney from Knoxville is going to enlist some volunteers from that organization or organizations that do that, and try to get with Philip and members of the staff to try to craft something that's very similar. While he was there, he brought up another issue, and it was with modular home inspections, especially when they come to where they put a modular home on field. There's kind of a list of compaction requirements that and other checklist items. There's some concern on the thoroughness that those inspections are being completed with. And he wants, I think Kathy is going to kind of get a group together that will hopefully address some of those. And I think Jenny Taylor is the program manager over that, to get with her to try to craft something that's a little bit clearer for our registrants, and obviously some good guidance for those that review those reports. We went over NCEES. Well, basically, we spent most of the time over the only motion that we knew that was somewhat controversial. There's a motion that says that the way we read it, that engineering technology degrees were basically seemingly equivalent to an engineering degree and should be treated as such. But if you read the rationale, it wasn't exact. The rationale didn't match the wording, and so we're going to get some clarification. We believe that there may be a path forward for people with engineering technology degrees if they meet the engineering requirements of a bachelor degree or an ABET degree, but we need to get some clarification on that. We need to understand that process a little bit better, and so we're probably going to vote against the motion, but we'll see how the discussion goes at the annual meeting, because there was, again, the rationale was kind of different from what the recommendation was, and we want to make sure that we understand that. Let's see, and then make sure that was it. Okay, and then the next one's Engineering Definitions Committee, which we hung around for, and I will acknowledge that Frank did seem to be in a little worse mood yesterday than he is today, so you all don't get the full brunt of that, but I appreciate it. And that's our report. Any questions?
Questions? Thank you. Let's move on to the Architect Report Committee report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we had our architects meeting this morning. We had a couple of interesting topics to cover. And if I omit something, please help me out here, guys. One of the ones that the interesting one that we have in NCARB, we have what's called the Integrated Path to Architectural License. This is our effort to promote licensure across the country and in the states, and we I think are all on board in Tennessee of trying to do that to our professionals. Basically what this is, and I'll just read this off the page here. IPAL is what it's called. The IPAL option students in the by enrolling in an IPAL option, students in the process of earning a degree from a NAB accredited program can complete the Architectural Experience Program, AXP, which was intern, yeah, and that's the old version, right? Sorry, and the Architectural Registration Examination, ARE, concurrently. Basically, what this is if you are a student and you can do all this and do 3,740 hours of experience while you're in college, you're a Superman or a Superwoman. So that's the door is open. There are only a few institutions, colleges in the country that do that. Tennessee has a requirement of 3 years experience, as other states have a specific number. So we had an applicant that applied for that, and we're not able to accept that because of our state law that specifically requires 3 years, which is a holdover from years ago in regard to, when I got licensed, there was a specific time that you had to work for someone. So basically, in a nutshell, we are deferring this back to staff and legal to see what options we may have to adopt something similar or that from NCARB to be equal to the other states in the country. So interesting scenario about how a student can do that. If they can work and get the 37, 40 hours while they're in school, wow, that's a lot of time. I know that wouldn't have been difficult for me. So, but that was one of our discussions, and then we had an application that it's another NCARB related issue. So we're dealing with that, but we're looking into what that might entail if we can modify that 3-year experience. So, anything else? No? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Definitions Committee.
Thank you. So we met in the afternoon yesterday, and as a review, the Definitions Committee consists of all 4 disciplines being represented: Susan, Frank, Blair, myself. I found Frank to be delightful, just so you know. We had a great discussion centered around the fact that the Engineers Committee is pushing forward on the definition of engineering rather hard. And so I brought everyone on our Definitions Committee up to speed with regard to what the engineers had discussed earlier in the morning and gave them, I believe, version 3.0, 2.0? I can't remember. 2.0. But I'm trying to keep up with the versions as we go through them, and we discussed at great length where we were with regard to the landscape architect's definition possibility, and Blair had a very well-prepared document with 3 different options, and they were all looking at. And as he mentioned earlier, the landscape architects have gotten very involved and proactive at the state level, and so he expects that by the next time we get together, there'll be further refinement on that document. I think Frank was thinking that we could, by virtue of the engineers pushing forward, that might be a good way to help the architects push forward a little bit too. And of course, Susan has already written all of hers and completed her homework well in advance, as usual. So we're well on our way. And I guess I would just say for the record that we have a goal in the engineering committee to have the definition of engineering to the point where the engineering committee likes the definition by the December board meeting. So we're working actively through iterations of the definition of engineering, and although we do not have to have all 4 disciplines represented on a rule proposal, we certainly hope we get close. And I have no idea how long that entire process will take. We recognize it'll be substantially longer than December, but the engineers are hoping to have what we would put forth as a definition of the engineering by December. I think the other thing I wanted to mention, and Casey is not here, but we need to have a public outreach on this issue, and I would hope that industry could help with prompting some conversation. And Roxana, I guess if you could coordinate with Casey and ask if there is a way that ACEC, TSPE, and the other available societies could possibly host statewide chapter meetings and have an open forum that maybe board members could attend and answer questions and talk through, not just definition. There's probably other issues, too, that could be put forth on the agenda at these meetings, but that is one of the things I'd like to see us do this fall. And that's going to require a lot of effort and a lot of time. I don't think there was anything else that was of note that came out of our meeting, unless one of our other committee members wants to bring anything up. But I would say, just in general, we're pushing forward, and everyone is pushing with regard to their own discipline, and I feel really, really privileged to be a part of this. I think we're making progress. So thank you.
Comments? Thank you, Kathy. Okay, general discussion. Just note here that the ASLA annual conference is in San Diego, November 15th through 18th. I would love to go to that meeting.
Somebody's got to do it, I guess.
Got to do it. That's right. Susan?
The CIDQ national meeting is November 7th through the 9th, which has already been approved for me to go, and I have registered. So supposed to be one other person go to that meeting. So San Antonio. Right there.
Robert?
So the meeting's in San Diego. Have you been approved to go? Do we need to make a motion or anything on that? Or
I believe we need to make a motion because I
We didn't do it in
we
June?
did not do that
Okay.
in June.
We do
That's right.
then, yes.
I'll make a motion that if everything is approved at the administration level, that we designate Blair to go to that meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, Alliance for Responsible Professional Licensing. This is something that I came upon that I'd never heard of before. I'd never seen this before. Have you? 68. I'd never heard of it, so, but, well, yeah, the notification came from CLARB, but it involves, let's see here.
I think it's several professions, because I know the accountancy
Yes.
board has been talking about that, and Kathy brought it up as well. So it's maybe relatively new, but definitely worth having these conversations. See what they do.
Blair, I think based on the email I got the other day, it said the NCWS is a founding member of that partnership also.
I actually thought it was written in here, but I don't find it in here, so. But NCARB, but I thought NCARB was part of that as well. I do not see it here. I apologize. But this is something to have on our radar. I know nothing about it, but I'm sure we'll hear more about it in the future. I thought it was interesting that accountancy was lumped in here with the design side, design professions. So, okay. Any discussions about that? Any other general discussion?
I could add for the October meeting, if anyone has additional topics that we want to talk about. I think today we brought up the one regarding renewals or increase in expired licenses. I have a couple notes that I've made throughout, but anything that you can think of, since it's our 3-day meeting, please send that my way. The meeting will be here It'll be 3 days right now, at least, is scheduled. We talked about with the architects, and I think we've talked about it maybe at a previous meeting, the possibility of inviting the universities again to this one. Last year when we did the October meeting, it was the universities almost all were here, and it was to present about the grants, where this year they wouldn't. But we discussed and did a survey, if you recall, asking if they would still be interested in coming, even though it isn't the year for them to participate, just coming to share information, to have conversations. And I think our survey was successful. At least 5 or 6 of the universities, and I've got the notes, said that they would be interested. Is the board, would you like me to invite those that said, yes, we're interested to participate, or invite them all and say, you know, and leave one of the days? What is the opinion of having some time allowed, whether it's one of the days in the morning, an afternoon, for the different 4 different professions to sit down and meet with the universities?
I personally like the idea, but I think that we need to determine what they're going to share. You know, the one university comes in at a 5-minute, just here's what's new, what's happening with us, and those that want to spend 20 minutes. So somehow, I don't know how we get that under control. Susan?
I agree. I need to talk to the interior design programs about interior architecture, using it as a term, because people are popping it up because the schools have changed their names. And so they didn't see this as a repercussion, and even though we asked them not to do it, they did it anyway. So that's something I think we could put down as a topic. It's not a legal profession at this point. So,
Kathy?
Basically, I was going to say the same thing that you said, is that if we're going to invite them, I would like for us to be very specific with regard to what it is that we're inviting them to do when they get here. I don't want any of them to be embarrassed, and I don't want some of them to send students and some of them send the dean. That seemed to get lost in the message a few years ago. So let's, and also, like you said, the timing. If we're going to give them 5 minutes apiece or 25 minutes apiece, but they need to know that ahead of time. And I certainly don't want to waste their time and have them come here and think one thing and it be just an informal, we had a cup of coffee and chit-chatted, and then they go away thinking we wasted their time. So let's just be really intentional about that. That would be my only input. But I'd love having them here. I think that is, without a doubt, one of the best things we did a couple years ago, spending quality time with those guys.
I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot about the different universities and their approach. All of them are different, how they approach things, but I'm just concerned about the time. It's the same token, like you say, Kathy, we don't want to insult them by giving them 3 minutes of time, and they travel this distance and prepare for it. So, but how do we quantify that? How do we do that? What do we think is fair? We have 17 total.
Robert was...
Robert, you first?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Frank?
Yes. If we're inviting universities to come, I think we also ought to invite Belmont University, and just, if they would, give us an update on their pursuit of having an architectural school.
So I can comment to that. They just identified a dean, and I sent that information to Roxanne Monday. Yeah, we just got information on that, so from an interior designer. So anyway. I was also going to suggest, that maybe we need to ask the deans what topics they would like to discuss. I mean, we don't have to create them all. They may have some they want to bring up themselves. So,
Robert?
So let's quantify this just a little bit. I think we need to start the meeting out in each profession. Go ahead and designate a person, and let's list 3 or 4 things that each one of the professions are seeing from a board standpoint. You know, you talked about interior architecture. We've got definitions. We've got other things that we're dealing with. I know the architects have several. And let's just give them 4 or 5 topic things that we're dealing with as a board. And just, again, I think it's better if it's a two-way flow of information. And then kind of put the same thing on the universities. Tell us 3 things that you're doing right now that are major priorities for your program or your university, especially those things that have interaction with the board or that we may be able to assist or would be of some importance to us. I would also think that just based on the timing, that we could maybe do this in a lunch type setting. I think we kind of did that one year, so that it's not, again, we got people driving from a long distance away that may just come up and go back in one day. And I mean, if it's not something that can be taken care of by the board funds, that's fine. I'll be willing to, and I know there's others that would be as well, to kind of offset the cost on that, because I just think it's important for us all to get together. And I think that environment, you know, we're asking them to come sometimes 3 and 4 hours away, 5 hours in some cases, and having it kind of in the middle day gives them time to get down here in case there's a restriction on spending the night or that kind of thing. And, you know, if we're going to do that, we ought to feed them a little bit, because, I mean, that is kind of a sacrifice on some stuff. So that was me. That's my recommendation.
I personally like that idea, having something in the morning and up to lunch, you know. But thinking time-wise, if we allocate, let's just say 10 minutes to present, and them listening to others present as well, there's much value in that as well. So that's a positive. But I like the idea of the lunch situation as well. So, my opinion. Any other thoughts? Is 10 minutes too little? Too much? How do we do this? Steve?
Well, I'm going to be the dissenting view here. I think every other year is plenty. The years we bring the deans here, that's about all we get done. And I think you could make an argument that, particularly this year with definitions, and maybe we ought to look at what other items that we need to discuss in the retreat setting that we can't ever get to at a meeting before we bring another block of time in. So unless there's a really good reason to have them come in this year after coming last year, let's think about what other items we want to deal with in October.
So I like what Robert said, that we provide them with some issues that we have from a board perspective, and then they provide us with some issues or responses to those issues. But I also agree with Steve over there that the last time we had all the deans, we spent the majority of a full day with those, if not the full day with them, and every other year to me seems reasonable, because if we're only going to get, if we invite everyone and 4 show up, and we've had this happen before, where, you know, it was very spotty when people showed up, and so it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. So is 10 minutes too much? Yeah. Is it not enough? Yeah. So depends on who's presenting and what they're presenting, and we had some real good presentations, but then we had 25 slides that were marketing slides. I mean, so it's hit or miss on that. So I tend to agree with Steve that if we do what Robert suggests about the comments and how we might respond to those comments and communicate with each other prior to that, and I don't think we can say you're not invited. If someone wants to show up and be part of that conversation, that's certainly their right. It's a public meeting, but you know, I'm just concerned about having to plan all that time in addition to what we have to cover as a board. So, just my opinion. Thank you.
Susan?
I don't see why this couldn't be a voluntary thing. We can't demand they come anyway, but I think to have a roundtable discussion is our format. You know, leaves it to, if one person wants to speak for 1 minute and then one needs 10, if you're within that group, then that's going to be your topic, and it's not going to interfere with the architects say or where the engineers are in another room. So I think it needs to be maybe a 2-hour session, you know, roundtable discussion. It's voluntary to come. Here's some list of topics. We would like to hear what you have to say about other items, and see what we can do to move forward. That's all my thoughts are.
So we have
It's
different.
not about going over how they spent the grant money.
Sure.
Okay, it's totally different.
So Roxana, with regard to the overall schedule, October's schedule,
Yes.
to fit in a 2-hour session, as Susan would suggest, where are we with time? Because I understand that during the October meeting, every committee will meet.
Right.
Correct?
And I think the 2-hour, or as Robert said, if we did morning through lunch, whatever that time frame means, could work. So I think we can do that, because right now we've got committee topics, but the full meeting may be a swift business meeting like this and only half a day, so we could be okay. The other piece that we may end up with some formal hearings by then, because we've got some cases that have aged and may end up having a formal hearing for one of those days. And then the other piece to consider that you all need to decide is, because in the October meeting that was about the grants, most came, with few exceptions, after 4 or 5 follow-ups. It wasn't we're coming. I mean, we had to call repeatedly and email. But yes, most did come. But we did I did an email survey saying the board really appreciated your time. It was wonderful. It was well worth it. Would you be interested? Of those, only 4 or 5 said yes. So is the interest just to reach out to those that have told me we're interested in coming even on the off year, or to all? That you'll need to kind of decide as well.
Ricky?
So I don't know if we're ready for a motion yet, but I'm just listening to everybody. I mean, I'm thinking that we're talking about something that might just be from like 11 to 1, so that they can drive up that morning, drive back afterwards. And I like the round table thing, so that it's not a presentation each one is giving, because that's when we run into what Steve's worried about. That's a big block. That's a whole 4 or 5 hour thing. That if we said we're going to have a round table lunch, and we're going to try to collect topics like Robert said beforehand that we can kind of kick around, and we'll and it'll be round table, volunteer, and it's not a formal presentation. You're welcome, and I would, if we agree on something like that, I would probably send it back out to all the schools to say, we're going to do this. It's available for you if you want. But right now we can expect that maybe 5 would be involved with that.
Right. Or more, yeah. I'm fine with that. If that's the wish, and we do a motion, and the only reason for the motion is because we will be getting the lunch and starting to look at those pieces. And then if the board wants to start sending me topics, maybe 2 weeks from now I hold on for our topics and even include those. That may encourage more to come. I don't know. Yeah.
Susan?
One consideration is with the change in the grants, they may have more questions this time, So that might be one of our topics, So anyway.
Robert?
I'll go ahead and kind of make a motion. I think we need to meet from 11 to 1, have a lunch, and I think each group gets some topics, and let's kind of lead that conversation. And I'm going to go ahead and give you 3 or 4, and I know this does not affect the proper way to make a motion, but I'll go ahead and do that. One from the engineering committee is threats to licensure. We also, I think, are going to be in a large discussion that will require some academic help when we look at equivalence of master's degrees and technology degrees and how we figure that out. And then I think an update on definitions. I think those are kind of 3 topics that we would see that would impact their world. And then I agree with Susan. I think the new grant needs to come in, the process needs to come in there. And let's just spend a couple hours, because Steve's right. We don't need to take the better part of a day listening to whatever. And because it's an information, but the information is for them to take back with them, but it's for our benefit to hear their opinion on some, because we do have that interaction or those connections with them. So 11 to 1, lunch, and then let's say 6, 7 topics and just kind of rapid fire them out there and try to get perspectives and background so they can be in there. And I've probably given you 4 or 5 just off the top of my head, but anyway, that's my motion.
So this would be different than last year's in that it's not a dog and pony show as to what we are doing at our university. It's to put those questions out there on the table and discuss it, have an open discussion with people. Kathy?
Yeah, I'd like to offer a friendly amendment. We haven't even voted on it yet, but to define who we're inviting. I would just, again, I'm sensitive to the fact that there were some institutions that sent students and some that sent deans. So who are we actually inviting? And when we send the invitation, if it is, for instance, and I'm not suggesting it is, but if it's to the dean, then it needs to be to the dean or his representative. So let's please make sure we do that.
That's how it's been. I don't think students would have ever been invited, but in the case of a transition between deans, and the board can decide if the dean emails or just sends a student, I don't know what we could do to stop that.
I think a
Because the
department
invitations are-
head is appropriate, or a faculty, full-time faculty member. Any of those three. So.
But Kathy said the
Yeah.
dean or their
Yeah.
designated representative is fine.
So I understand that would be, we have a motion on the floor, but I understand that would be 17 plus 1 of Belmont, potentially, as far as invitations go.
And we may still be at 17 because O'More is no longer, so Belmont.
They're together.
Yeah, I know,
So
but that's the
it's
same
kind of a
count.
wash.
So the count is
Okay.
the
Yeah.
same.
So
I
it's
think we're
interior
there.
design and architecture with Belmont now. So.
Okay. All right, we have a motion on the floor. We have a second.
Hold on one second. Can you amend your motion?
Yeah, I will. So my motion is that we have a meeting from 11 to 1 on the day that's appropriate. I don't know if it's on the appropriate days determined by staff, with a luncheon component to it, where we invite deans or their representatives to be there to discuss several topics of interest to the board and how they interact with the universities and with the universities, period. That's
Motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's Thursday. Wanda's correcting me. So this will open up our Thursday and meeting time. But we'll start working on that now. 11 to 1 or so. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Friday would be the board meeting. That's how we did it. I think you've always done it. If there are formal cases, it would fit into our Friday schedule. That would become a full day. And then Wednesday would be our committees, yes.
Have any other additional business?
As far as planning for time for the retreat, will it start in the morning, Wednesday morning, so we will need to come over Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we will follow the list of time based on the committees, similar to what we did last year, unless we want to change it. But the more topics that you send me that we want to talk about, obviously, we'll make sure that everybody has plenty of time for that, your committees.
Remind me the date of that, October
Absolutely. I think it's the first Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of October.
2, 3, 4. Okay. Thank you. Any additional business? Seeing none,
Make a motion that you do your duty and close this meeting.
let's close this meeting. This meeting
Well
is
done,
adjourned.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Thank you. Is adjourned. Yes.
Thank you.
Good job, Mr.
I
Chair.
did. I slurred it, I guess. I quit slurring my words. And I need to quit looking over there when.
There is always more there.
He's so good at this. We need to do this for.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's the guy that's good at it.